There we are. Give people a little bit of time to kind of jump in here, but a couple of the
there we go.
Got a couple of regulars that are already here.
Hey, Golden Vital Spin. What's up? What's up, guys? How's everybody doing?
We're doing well.
I'm great.
Absolutely fantastic.
At least I can see and hear everybody.
Yeah, and considering this is my first, be thankful for that.
Speaking of that, thank you for hosting tonight, man.
Yeah, this is cool. This is definitely cool, and it's kind of weird because even with the whole YouTube and this day of social media, I'm almost an anti-social media type. I don't even know if I've ever told you guys that.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I have no Facebook page. I've never done a post on Facebook. Never done Instagram. Like the only social media I've ever done is YouTube, specifically the VC.
So what'd you do when you took 10 months off?
Nothing. As far as social media, absolutely nothing. So I guess bought more records than I should have.
Yeah. That's the bad thing about the VC, though. There's a lot of stuff that I would never have known about, and that's good in many ways. In many ways, it's bad too, though.
Yeah.
I know Greeno said that since he's been off of YouTube, he hasn't bought near as much as he used to when he was doing videos all the time.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Hey, Steve, did Greeno get a new channel?
Well, I don't know if it was him or if it was George that set it up, but they have Man Cave of Doom.
Right.
And all it is a live stream. They do a live stream once or twice a week. So it's been pretty good, though. I've watched 3 or 4 of them. They kind of got the jump start. I think they actually started it before all the coronavirus stuff started. So it was just kind of coincidental. And then now pretty much everybody's doing them because we have nothing else to do.
Exactly.
I'm still working. So I'm still, I save a couple hours a day by not driving to the office, but I'm still doing my 8 hours a day, 9 hours a day. But it's still a lot nicer. I like the live, getting a couple people on here and kind of shooting the shit back and forth,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. What's up, Andrew, man? Thanks for stopping by. Always good to see you.
Yeah, hey, Andrew.
Every time I see his name, I just think Mr. Jazz himself, because every time he shows something, it just totally blows my mind.
Hey.
Hey, it's Brad. What's up, man?
Well, you guys want to get started?
Yeah.
How many do we got in here?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, looks good so far. I mean, and you know how this thing goes, man. If we don't get started now, we're liable to be here till midnight.
This is true. Yeah. So, I mean, first and foremost, thank all you guys for kind of coming over and tuning in. Kind of the first live stream I ever hosted. So I really appreciate you guys showing up. And of course, I'm going to start off with, this crowd of all. I was thinking about that earlier. Just this funny feeling that almost came over me when I was thinking, okay, what am I going to pull? What am I going to talk about? And almost getting like nervous. Wait a minute, am I going to be able to keep up with those guys? Am I going to be able to it really is that weird. Like that's the amount of respect that I have for all three of you from a standpoint of just music knowledge and everything. It's weird. As much as you think you always feel like someone knows a little bit more.
Oh yeah, the VC definitely definitely humbles you in your music knowledge.
Oh yeah, big time.
Absolutely,
big time. So, but yeah, this is going to be fun because we're kind of keeping this one a bit light and just really kind of diving in and just talking about a few different albums from a number of different genres instead of just focusing strictly on one genre or one whatever. We're going to flip through 6 different genres tonight, and what we basically did was went through our collection and just picked out 2 albums from 6 different genres that we just really feel are great albums to know. Not necessarily our favorite in that genre, not necessarily the best from that genre, but just Hey, this is a great one that everyone should know about. So this thing does not go, well into the wee hours. We're going to jump right into it. And I think the wee hours, not the wee hours. That's like 2 a.m. or after. Mom said, "Don't be out into the wee hours." So,
saying wee.
So yeah, let's just kind of jump right into it. I think the first genre we'll do is let's start with country. And Steve, why don't you kick it off, man?
I think if it's country, we got to have Billy start this one off.
It's too much pressure, man. Too much pressure.
You want me to start?
For us or you?
Yeah, go right after. There you go.
I think Billy should not be allowed to show any country with
ever
his collection is going to be.
I just feel like both of the choices I selected are easily choices that Billy could have selected as well, because I know they're two of his favorite albums too.
That's what I was thinking when I was trying to pick. I was like, I know Steve's going to pick this.
He's the king of the neo-traditionalists. You should already know who I'm talking about. It's one of my all-time favorite albums. It's actually a movie soundtrack, and it's still his best album, but it's the Pure Country soundtrack from George Strait. So this just got a vinyl release for the first time. I think it was the beginning of last year. So it's nice to finally have this one on vinyl. There's not a bad song on here. If you guys haven't seen the movie's great too. But the soundtrack and just the album as a whole is by far my favorite George Strait album. And I love everything that he's ever released. So to say that is really saying a lot about it. So
that movie, for as cheesy as it is, it's so great. I mean, it's timeless. I love it. I love it. And
come on, George Strait with a mullet.
Oh, yeah, that's right. He was trying to pull the Billy Ray. What was it, Dusty? That's a great choice, man.
Awesome.
Did you happen to pick two? Like, do
you want to do show both of them, or do you want to? How do you want to do it?
Well, maybe just let us know the one that didn't make the cut. Don't necessarily go into detail, but what was the one that didn't quite make the cut? This one
could have just as easily been number one.
That's kind of how I did.
This is one of the most important country music albums of all time, and definitely one of my favorites. But it's Honky Tonk Heroes from Waylon Jennings.
Absolutely,
killer stuff. I'm so glad I didn't pick that now.
That's why I went with George Strait, because I thought you were more likely to pick the Honky Tonk Heroes than I
might surprise you.
Pure country. So
yeah, that's nice. I see Lucille says that I have the clearest picture. Well, I am that is kind of my job, is like graphics and video and photos and yeah, I do kind of take a little bit of pride in it. But thank you. So
he wasn't talking about your appearance, he was talking about the video.
Well, so what do we want to? Who's going to be sloppy seconds?
Let's see. Well, Mitch, why don't you go ahead and go? We'll let Billy go last on this one since he's the country guru.
He is. In fact, this is some VCLT from Mr. Hurst.
And Steve, I know Steve loves that one.
The neighborhood I grew up in Phoenix is literally, actually in Glendale, is about a half mile from where he grew up. So he's kind of a local hero in that region. And actually, when it was I with you when I found the 6i OG pressing of it. So there you go.
This album is just perfect.
Oh yeah,
it's absolutely perfect. And Marty, in my opinion, I think my favorite thing about him is just his character songs. Every song is a story. It draws you in. It makes you can really visualize what's going on. Yeah, I just love it. So this is a really clean copy Billy gave me, about a year ago? I've been looking for it for forever and ever, and whenever I see it around here in Kansas City, it's just always thrash. So you can always count on the country guru to have a clean copy in his backup stash,
That's glad I was able to help you out with that one, man.
So that one's obviously my first pick, but coming up close second, it's not exactly a pure country album, but it's definitely country-ish, and I probably spent the most time with it over the last calendar year. And that's New Riders of the Purple Sage. This is their debut. These guys are Jerry Garcia plays pedal steel on this album. He doesn't sing or anything, but it's just like if you can imagine, like the Grateful Dead doing Mama Tried. This is kind of the same vibe that these guys have. There's a little bit of country rock, a lot of weed smoking, just real laid back. I love this album front to back. If I had to pick, probably going with either Portland Woman or Dirty Business. I had to pull out my CD copy. I've been looking for this album for 18 months, and white cover and Deadheads equals thrashed every time. So if anybody gets a lead on a clean copy of this bad boy, let me know.
Steve, weren't you looking for some? Did you pick up some New Riders, or was that somebody else?
I have a couple signed copies of there. What's the main guy from New Riders that's always been in the band? I have a couple signed albums of his, but no, we were looking at that live one, that Record Store Day live.
Okay.
And I think I ended up grabbing something else instead of it, but
I knew
final we looked at it.
Kind of when as soon as he showed that, it kind of like, oh man, I think Steve was either got that or just picked it up or something, or somebody did.
Well, and it's that Western swing, and I've really got to be in the mood to listen to it. It's one of those that I like it, but I just have to be in the right headspace for it.
Yeah, it's good stuff though. Good stuff.
Huh. That's actually a new one for me, Mitch. I've never heard that album.
Really?
Yeah. That's something that I'm gonna have to explore, especially the way you're talking about it.
Yeah, what year was that, Mitch? Was that early 70s?
Let me see if there's a copyright date on here. Yeah, I think it's right in there. This doesn't say. I think it's 71 if I remember correctly, but I could be wrong.
This is my favorite New Riders.
Of course it is.
And the music has nothing to do with it
at all.
It's the best of. It's got 2 hits on it.
I don't know, Billy. You probably have a more eloquent way of describing them or comparing them to other people, but
I think you pretty well hit it. I mean, it is very much jam band type, dead country folk with a little bit of that Western swing that Steve, mentioned.
Yeah.
All right, good stuff. All right, so I guess I'll go next and pull out my country picks here. And I'm kind of the same way you guys mentioned. Either one of these could have been my pick, but what I actually decided to go with was this one right here, which is Gillian Welch, Soul Journey. And I don't know, I've never been very clear if people are very familiar or not familiar with Gillian Welch here in the VC, because I've spoken about her a lot through a number of different videos. But if you're not familiar with her, I think if you've ever seen the movie Oh Brother Where Art Thou, I mean, most people have seen that. She sang on about 3 or 4 tracks on that album. So a lot of that same flavor of just that, old time bluegrass, down home, sitting around picking the guitar type of country, if you will. That's exactly what she does, and it's absolutely beautiful. It really is, because it goes back to just being so simple. It's not a bunch of complex big band, no electric guitars or anything. It's just her kind of doing the down home whiny country, and I really like this for the same reason that I like a lot of that same type of blues, early blues album, Blind Melon and stuff like that. You put them on and all you hear is one person sitting in front of a mic playing the guitar and doing their thing, and she really gets it. So awesome artist.
So Brandon, you had shown that in a couple different videos, and I always make a mental note and then I forget, take a brain dump, but I'm always thinking. So I first heard of her from Steve Earle. She had done a couple duets with Steve back in the early 2000s. But how many records does she have, and have they just started putting those out on like a reissue, or are they hard to find?
Yeah, I think she's only had 2, I believe, that's come out on vinyl. Her last one, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but that one got kind of issued when the album came out. But all of her stuff prior to that, Soul Journey is the only one they've pressed.
Okay.
And I cannot figure out for the life of me why they're waiting so long to get to her other stuff. It's her early catalog is that's the gold.
Yeah.
You know, but for the most part, my entire collection by her outside of that one album is only CD.
Was that stuff originally released in the 90s?
I think late 90s or early 2000s.
Okay,
I mean, it's still pretty recent stuff for the most part.
That probably has a little bit to do with why they haven't been, reissued yet.
Yeah.
Good one.
But yeah, fantastic stuff there. And again,
it definitely has a unique voice.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very unique.
And it goes back to that word that pops up for me a lot of times when it comes to talking about country is that pure. Like whenever that feeling comes up out of something, I tend to just latch right onto it. It's just awesome album. And favorite song off of there is probably Miss Ohio. I think that's an absolute great track. But the runner-up that didn't quite make it, equally deserving though, the one and only Lucinda Williams. West. One of her many fantastic albums right there. So those are my two country picks.
Man, if I was a betting man, I would have lost the farm on that one because I thought it was going to be Luke Bryan.
Well, you know, if they press tailgates and tan lines on vinyl, it probably would have, because that is one of my absolute favorite records. Love his voice, man.
It's funny. Lucinda Williams is from Lake Charles, Louisiana, where my whole family is from. So it's funny that two of these albums have been from areas that I'm basically from, outside of Nashville.
Well, in the comments, Cards fan says Miranda Lambert covered the song "Look at Miss Ohio." That's crazy. Miranda is one of my favorites, and I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, I haven't either. All right, Billy, so why don't you hit it? Go ahead and show us what the real country is.
Well, it's not necessarally just yes, it's real country, but
yeah.
I'm gonna do it.
You can't show your own album.
Kind of, it's right up there. Honorable mention. So I'm going to do it in a little bit reverse as you guys. So I always talk about this one here, Randy Travis, Storms of Life. Always talk about it, but I'm not going to talk about it this time. This is my honorable mention. If you want to hear more about how great of a country album that is, check out any one of my videos I talk about it in. But what I did pick, I had a hard time deciding. I was going to go with what Steve shown, what Waylon album that Steve shown. But I thought, man, we always talk about that album, Steve, and with good reason. Such an amazing album, Honky Tonk Heroes. But I think the Ramblin' Man is just as important as when you start talking about Waylon. This is a killer outlaw country album, and it's got like 2 or 3 number ones on it. So not just the title track, the Ramblin' Man, but Rainy Day Woman, unbelievable. The song Amanda, The Hunger, Can't Keep My Hands Off You. Just really, really great stuff by one of the best, that ever did country music. I think that's one that doesn't get enough love. Because there's so many great Waylon albums, but that's one that I think I find myself going to more and more lately.
I thought about grabbing Old Waylon, but I had to go with Honky Tonk Heroes.
How can you know what? Nobody would be wrong if you would have picked Honky Tonk Heroes, Old Waylon, Ramblin' Man, Dreamin' My Dreams. I mean, so many. You could have probably picked any one of like a half a dozen, and we all would have said, yeah, it's not wrong.
So Golden Vinyl spins that Hillbilly Deluxe, Guitars and Cadillacs, and Buenas Noches from the Lonely Room. All 3 amazing albums.
Oh, shoot, yeah. But if you had to only pick one of those 3,
Hillbilly Deluxe.
Hillbilly Deluxe would be my pick.
I'm going Guitars.
That This is good.
And Buenos Noches from A Lonely Room is killer too, man.
Billy, would you say out of like the 4 or 5, I guess, your Mount Rushmore of outlaw country singers, is Waylon your absolute favorite?
Yeah. Hands down. I mean, the one that would shock people would probably be Johnny Paycheck. I know as far as outlaw singers go, he's probably the lowest on a lot of people's list, but I rate him really, really high. I would probably rate him above David Allan Coe if you want to get right down to brass tacks. And David Allan Coe is pretty high on my list.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Waylon would be at the top because, I mean, he basically created, it's his genre, He released the first album.
Mm-hmm.
He released the album that the outlaw country name came from.
Yeah.
Willie Nelson had a lot to do with it, but it was really Waylon that started it and gave it the name,
Yeah, if it weren't for Waylon, there would be no outlaw country.
Yeah. And you could say Johnny Cash had a lot to do with it because he was there with him, and so did Willie. But
Johnny was more about the movement than the sound.
I'm not talking about the sound. I mean, he's the one that kind of gave Waylon. I mean, he really gave Waylon his start, So
yeah, it's good.
Yeah,
good stuff. That was a good first round.
Yeah,
country music warming you up. Oh, what about the great George Jones? Man, what needs to be said? I mean, if you don't know and you're not familiar with George Jones, the man has had a 55 or 60-year career. I think it was just unbelievable. And not only to be around making music for that long, but he kind of reinvented himself and went in, 1997, Steve, when he came out with the album Choices.
Man, I don't even remember. Yeah, about
97 or 98. It was the late 90s. And, country radio and everything had all but forgotten George Jones. He hadn't had a hit on the radio since like 1985 or 86. And, well, I take that back. He had I Don't Need Your Rocking Chair in like 91. But that was him kind of making fun of himself and where country music was, and they had forgotten about all the old timers. And he got a hit, but he also kind of got a hit by having artists like Mark Chestnut, Travis Tritt, Joe Diffie, Tracy Lawrence, all those guys that were at the top of the charts at the time singing on that track with him, Vince Gill. But man, George Jones is a beast.
Indeed. All right. So good first round on the country. Why don't we shift to the next genre, and let's go with let's do the 80s. Let's start with a little fun here. So Mitch, why don't you go ahead and take the first shot here. So
when we were talking about what to show, and we mentioned the 80s, this album just immediately came to my mind, and then I realized, it's a pretty big curveball, but I couldn't not pick it. So we got Mother Love Bone Shine. This, of course, this is coming at the tail end in '89.
I love that album, though.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
I was lucky enough to find this OG last summer. I love this album. I grew up in the house with my dad, listening to Mother Love Bone all the time. Obviously, side A is side B. It just repeats itself, but I could listen to those 5 songs if you want to count Chloe Dancer and Crown of Thorns being 2, but I could listen to those songs all day, every day if I had to. Obviously, there's no Pearl Jam without Mother Love Bone, and I love Pearl Jam. I'm super thankful for their music, but these guys, for me, are just head and shoulders above anything else that came out of Seattle, even over the next 10 years after them. Hugely influential in my own music taste, and the little bit of that seed of grunge mixed with kind of like some leftover glam rock, it's me every time.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it.
Yeah, and good pick. You jumped in with the very end of the 80s there. And I was thinking of doing the same thing, but I thought, I'll play it a little safe, maybe.
Yeah, I was hesitant at first to pick it because I was obviously like, that's not, what when you're talking about stereotypical kind of your favorite album from the 80s, I was like, man, that doesn't sound like the 80s,
Right.
But it counts.
Yeah, good pick.
1986, this bad boy.
Paul Simon.
Awesome.
Nice.
So yeah, Paul Simon, one of my all-time favorite songwriters. This album's obviously pretty experimental and heavily African influenced, just like a lot of albums that were coming out right around there in the mid '80s. But yeah, I just find that album to be perfect front to back, and it's really moving. And you got Chevy Chase in one of your music videos. You're winning,
Yeah. So Mitch, you're getting called out by Redco.
It has 1989 on the back, so
It works.
Close enough.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that Paul Simon album. It's we talk about it being just kind of experimental and a lot of different influences that kind of come into it. I remember actually not when it first came out, but after it got kind of big, it was actually bothering me a little bit because I felt like this isn't even Paul Simon. It's everybody else doing stuff around him. I guess maybe kind of a jealous type of reaction, if you can call it that or whatever. But yeah, I said it really was experimental and creative. And about 15 years ago, maybe longer than that, maybe 20 years ago, actually, I actually got a chance to see Ladysmith Black Mambazo in concert, the backing group on that album. And just, phenomenal. He knew what he was doing when he brought them along.
Yeah, he did.
Amazing.
Just to speak to Redco real quick, maybe that was Shine. That's their first EP.
The EP came out in '89.
Yeah, so Apple probably what they were confusing it with, excuse me. But yeah, I think just real quick, the only other album that I can think of from the 80s that did as well as Graceland with kind of bringing that African rhythm influence in is Speaking in Tongues by Talking Heads.
Mm-hmm.
Did a really good job with it.
Yeah. Awesome. Great pick. Great pick.
And just real quick, so when we selected the 80s, it's an open category. So we could pick genre from the 80s. So it may be kind of a mix what we show.
I even thought about picking another country album from the 80s. I was off the
hook. Steve, why don't you go for it, man? Let's see what you picked out for the 80s.
All right. So I'm going to show my runner-up first. This is one of my all-time favorite albums. And both of these albums were way ahead of their time. And they were both super influential. Actually, with both of these albums, I was introduced to both of them in the early 90s and thought that they were brand new albums. I had no idea that both had been around for as long as they have. And the first one came out in 1984, and it's the debut album from Violent Femmes.
Great pick.
And this is one of those albums that, like I said, I think I first heard Added Up in like 91 or 92. And it was on the radio. I thought it was a brand new song. And I went out and I found the cassette for it at like a used shop for like 50 cents. And I was shocked to see that it came out in 1984. I mean, it was so far ahead of the alternative punk mix that's in this album was, I think it's one of the best albums of 1984 and one of the best albums of the 80s. And that's my backup. That's my second pick. So
it's crazy that we all, I think a lot of the picks I'm going to have with Steve are in a lot in common. I almost picked that. I had that in my head.
Yeah.
So this next one is one of the most influential albums of the 80s in that it completely influenced the 90s. And it's funny you bring up Andrew Wood because he was hugely influenced by this band. Nirvana, Kurt Cobain basically said he got their sound from this band and from this album. David Bowie reignited his career after hearing this music and getting to know the band. And it's going to be Surfer Rosa from the Pixies.
Another great one. Yeah.
Super. And what's amazing is they didn't really get the due until the early 90s. Even though this came out, I think it was 88 when this came out, 87 when this came out. But man, it was just totally different than anything else that was out at the time, and it's just an amazing album. If you guys haven't heard this, it's a must-have. And again, I heard that in 92 or 93. I think I heard "Where Is My Mind" first, and I thought it was a brand new song. And then it's funny, I was at somewhere about 5 or 6 years ago, so well into the 2000s, and that song came on the radio, and I remember somebody asking if it was a new song. So for an album that came out in the mid to late 80s to still be to still make people think it's a brand new song and how relevant it still is just kind of a testament for how good the albums are, both of those albums.
Yeah, that is a fantastic album.
And I was actually first turned on to that. First I heard was in the 90s, and I thought it was new then. And it's like, geez, this is crazy. I mean, I imagine it probably didn't get much mainstream radio airplay at the time.
No, it was. I'm sure it was all over the college stations with REM and stuff like that. But the college radio, I doubt. I don't remember hearing it all until the 90s when, Nirvana and the other Seattle and Cali bands kind of that alternative sound really became big.
Right.
Yeah. Well, this is a very important question I figured I had to throw in here when Dimebag asked, who has the most Justin Bieber?
No, that's definitely Brandon.
Raise your hand.
Everybody raise your hands if you have a Justin Bieber album or albums in your collection. Damn it. Anyway, okay. Hey, you got to do what you got to do, right?
What's your favorite song off of those the box set you have?
The Justin, that's a person. That's not a live chat. That's more of a private conversation we're gonna have, man. I got a little bit of a rep here in the BC. That's one where Josh says someone needs to show the Cult Electric, which is an awesome album.
Yeah,
that could have definitely made it into my list. All right, well, good picks. Who wants to go next? Billy, you went last time, so we won't make you do that again. Why don't you go ahead and jump in?
Okay, so I'll do. I'm going to continue. So my whole time, I will just do my runner-up first. Again, I always talk about this album. Yeah. Love it. And I mean, to me, nothing screams '80s like Huey Lewis in the News Sports. Mm-hmm. Hit after hit after hit after hit. You guys know that. So that was my my runner-up. Here's what I decided to go with. REO Speedwagon, High Infidelity.
Nice.
To me, REO, man, of course, this has the Don't Let Him Go, Keep on Loving You, Take It on the Run. But even songs like In Your Letter, which is a very 50s, 50s type sound. Really, really fun song. And this is a great, fantastic album. It just screams 80s to me. And I love it. I love a lot of REO Speedwagon stuff. I really do like their early stuff, which didn't have all those radio hits. And then even when they ended all those pop power piano ballads, I love that stuff.
Nice. Good pick.
Thank you.
All right. I guess I'll go ahead and go next on this one. I'm not the 80s here. My runner-up, I went with The Church.
Nice.
Definitely a band that I think just does not get the respect that it deserves.
Church.
I mean, they have a ton of albums out. There's more than enough out there to, get a taste of them. But I think maybe one of the reasons why they didn't necessarily blow up, they never really kind of sold out from what they did. They kind of had their lane. They stayed in it, and I don't even know how many studio albums they had. I mean, it's like 10 plus or something like that. It was a ton, but just a fantastic band. Really played on that dark kind of monotone type of vocal, so just a band that I absolutely love, and I could have pulled really any album by them to to kind of show up my runner up. I mean, I'd probably say overall, Starfish might be my favorite album by them, which of course that has one of their most popular songs, which is Under the Milky Way, but absolutely fantastic band. We're not supposed to get that deep into the runner-ups. Just start going.
Because I thought mine were pretty vanilla, so you could take some of my time. Feel free.
Have you ever heard Seance?
Yeah.
That's your favorite from the church.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's the one that has Fly on it, right?
Yes.
That's on Fly. Yeah, which is just an amazing track. I mean, it's only like 2 minutes long, but I still think it's probably one of the best things they've ever done from just an individual song perspective. But my pick, I decided to go with Midnight Oil.
Yeah.
Another band that was, I think that they were fairly big in the late 80s. And I think this probably has their two biggest hits, so probably their most well-known album with Beds Are Burning and The Dead of Heart. But I've always found the best way to describe Midnight Oil is they're kind of like REM, just going a little bit to it like a darker place, a slightly scarier place, not quite as college-y, if you will, but just more so really kind of, is there something wrong with you, dude? Do you need some mental help? Like that's like that's
with a nutball.
Indeed.
He's a politician now too.
Yeah. I mean, when he danced, he looked crazy. When he sang, he looked crazy. Just very creative though. But yeah, this is an absolute fantastic album. It's a gem, and I just think it gets so overlooked, in my opinion, especially with the two songs that were hit. I think people don't tend to dive into the album deeper, but fantastic band, represents the late 80s pretty well.
Do you are you subscribed to Todd in the Shadows?
I don't think so.
He's been around for 6 or 7 years. He's a pop guy, but he does a series where he talks about one-hit wonders. It's called One Hit Wonderland. And he did a really good 15-minute video on Midnight Oil, because although they only had one hit here in the U.S., they have like 15 albums.
Yeah.
And they're huge in Australia. And
yeah.
But it just made me think of his video. He does a great video discussing the band.
Oh, cool. I have to definitely check that out. All right. So who's next?
I think we're done. I think we're on to R&B.
Indeed. So who wants to go first with the R&B? I'll actually kind of throw this one up in the air. Who has something so good they just can't wait to share?
I'll start.
I guess let me see.
So my runner-up, I don't have on vinyl. I have a cassette, and I didn't feel like digging for it. It's Bill Withers live at Carnegie Hall. It's on MoFi now. I actually have it on order. It hasn't come in yet, but Bill Withers live. Bill Withers is amazing to start with, and sadly we just lost him. But that live at Carnegie Hall show is amazing. But my number one pick is one of my all-time favorite albums. It was one of my mom's favorite albums, and it's just one of the all-time great R&B and soul records, and it's What's Going On.
Oh yeah,
from Marvin Gaye. I mean, it doesn't get much better than this. And I like everything that he ever released, but this album is hands and feet above the rest. And just the song Inner City Blues makes this album worth buying. And it's not even the biggest hit on here, but there it is.
Yeah, I think every one of us probably went back and forth in our head about putting that on there, but I didn't put it on there because I thought for sure somebody would have it on their list.
Sadly, I don't have a lot of R&B and soul, and I listen to it quite a bit, but I usually stream it. The problem is whenever I just never find the records that I want in good condition when I'm in the record stores, you know. And I thought, Mobile Fidelity just released this, and I almost bought it. But this is a Tamla pressing from like 10 years ago, and it's audiophile quality. It sounds amazing. And I just can't see spending $120 for the one-step master of this when this copy, it's not going to sound a whole lot better than this does. So,
yeah, right.
Indeed.
Yeah, that's the thing about the R&B stuff. I'm in the same boat, Steve. I don't have a whole lot of that stuff, but it's not that I don't really love it or appreciate it. I certainly do. And Brandon has, in the last few years that we've known each other, he's turned me on to a lot of that really cool stuff. And when we go shopping, he'll see me kind of hanging over here in the country area, and he'll be over here in the R&B soul area. And I'm kind of peeking over his shoulder and always asking what he picked up, and even just for some suggestions. So I thought that was kind of cool. Whenever you came over, I think it was the last time you came over, we both just picked some albums that we wanted to share, and we actually both picked the same one. So you want me to jump in?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Nice. Man.
I almost bought that a couple days ago.
Oh, it's so good. Soul, R&B, funk, just it has it all. It's so good. And Brandon and I actually spun this one the last time he was over. So that is my runner up. But man, she has 3 albums. Nasty Gal.
She has
self-titled. So
that's
she has
the only one I know of.
4. Yeah.
But I think I have 3. And they're all freaking fantastic, man. This one here is probably my favorite, though, the self-titled, just from my personal preference. Yeah, but they're all good. But the one I'm gonna actually show is kind of half-ass cheating, but it's we're talking about R&B soul, and I'm gonna show a country album.
You're gonna show Chris Stapleton.
I almost picked Stapleton, but I thought Brandon might actually do it as kind of a tribute to me. Country for a change. But no, man, in all seriousness, if you guys haven't heard this Marcus King, if you haven't heard of the Marcus King band, check them out. But if you haven't heard the Marcus King solo work, El Dorado, this just came out in January, and it is mind-blowing. I'm talking soul, R&B, blues, country, folk, with a little bit of Southern gospel in there too. I mean, this cat is amazing. I can't get enough of it. I think Brad, I see Brad at H2 Vinyl in the chat. He'll tell you. I mean, I think he just showed it in one of his latest videos. Dude, Brandon, if you haven't heard that, you've got to give that a listen.
And I have not. I have not.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And like I said, I'm in the same kind of boat as Steve. As I don't have a whole lot, and I've got a lot of the standards in there, but I'm always looking to get more. Sam Cooke, Aretha.
Yep, Sam Cooke and Aretha. Never go wrong with those two.
Absolutely.
All right, so Mitch, why don't you go next, man? I'll pull
Sure.
up this time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll pull my honorable mention first this time. Prince, musicology. Billy, shut up, man.
I know.
This is a great album. This is, obviously, if you're a fan of Prince, this is kind of a big comeback album for him. But for me, the reason I decided to pull this was simply because, in my opinion, Call My Name is probably the greatest slow jam of the early 2000s. That song alone is worth the price of admission on this record.
Wow.
So that's your runner-up?
Yeah. So, speak of Mo-Fi Bill Withers.
Oh, yeah.
This, obviously it's a little bit of a cheat because it's the greatest hits, but if you look at the track list on that thing, man,
take that.
How can you go wrong?
Woo.
Yeah,
Sounds great.
That's fantastic.
I love SACDs, but that's a whole other animal. Yeah, I was listening to that. I have like a thing that just happens to me where I'll be like listening to an album and then the person will die. I was listening to that. I got that like a couple of weeks before he passed and was really digging it, and I probably jinxed him.
You know, it's funny you say that. My wife and I were listening to Black Star when it was announced. It was like 2:00 in the morning when it was announced that Bowie died, and we just happened to be, because it had come out like a week earlier, and we happened to be listening to Black Star while the news was coming out that he had passed away.
Yeah,
Wow.
that was very similar to me when Bowie died, and then when Prince passed away. I had actually had just gotten into work and got a text from my dad, and I had literally just on my commute have been listening to the Girl 6 soundtrack that morning. So it was, it just seems to happen that way for whatever reason.
I thought about choosing Prince too, but I've never been able to. I've never really considered him R&B, but
You
just as easily could. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's just in my head, he's always been, an 80s synth kind of guy.
I think he definitely had little splashes of R&B.
Oh yeah.
Maybe even more than just a little on certain albums, especially even some of his later ones, But yeah, there's certainly some of them that are definitely straightforward funk, straightforward, whatever. What did I just saw a comment here? It was Mick, Curtis Mayfield. I almost picked Curtis Mayfield too. That's a great one. What do you pick?
Comment.
What do you pick?
What does not touch Van Halen?
It's not that big of a deal, Melinda. David Lee Roth's voice is already in the grave anyway, so why does it matter?
Oh man!
Oh my goodness!
Right, so Badu-Baduism is a great one.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing album.
I really love. Is it her last album? Or it might be her second to newest, but the one with "You Can't Use My Phone" on it was really good. It came out a couple of years ago. Final Guru will probably know what it is immediately.
Yeah, talking about Prince there, Vinyl and Kicks is saying Prince is definitely an R&B among many other genres. That's kind of the way that I've always seen him too. I think my natural reaction is to put him in a pop category. Yeah. But that's also probably because I know more early Prince than later Prince as well.
Same here.
So when I'm thinking about the first 5 albums, or say everything up through Under the Cherry Moon, I'm thinking that pop.
I got introduced to Prince at a roller skating rink when Purple Rain came out. Purple Rain and Dove's Cry used to play over and over in the roller skating rinks. And I remember skating to that. And that's still one of my all-time favorite albums.
Could you do the backward skate?
Yeah, I could. If I did it now, I would break my tailbone. But I could back in the day.
Crazy. There you go. Now Andrew says something there. That's right.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's almost doing a crime to try to categorize Prince. I mean, I've always just really described him as someone that almost just feels all of these different flavors. If you can feel a flavor, that makes sense. That's the way I've interpreted him. It's just something sounds good to him. He puts it in there. He's not trying to make it go down a certain path, which is why he was the genius that he was.
None of those flavors, Brandon, were vanilla, though.
Not at all.
There's a lot of raspberry going on there.
All right, so am I up?
You're up.
I guess I got to show something good.
You better.
I didn't know which one of these I was going to pick as my actual pick, but since someone already mentioned one, I will make it my honorable mention. And that's going to be Sam Cooke. Put a post note there. It's a Sam Cooke live at the Harlem Square Club. As you guys know, I am not a huge fan of live albums. It's just something that I just typically don't like them. This one is absolutely fantastic because it's one of the few albums that actually shows what Sam can do. You hear his smooth voice and all that good stuff when you're listening to his greatest hits or studio album, but there are not a lot of opportunities with albums that he released where you get to hear him just kind of raw in concert, bringing in that that gospel background that he came from. You get all of that on this album. So you talk about just a powerful, powerful album. And there's a section in what is it? Oh, on side B, the very first song is Somebody Have Mercy, and the next song is Bring It On Home to Me. There's about a 90-second piece where he finishes that song and he does like this little interlude leading into the second song. Might be the most amazing 90 seconds that Sam Cooke has ever laid down on an album. So if you have not heard that, highly, highly recommend. And that's my runner-up.
He comes up for he comes up a lot in the barbershop for best voice of all time.
Oh yeah,
that's a very common pick.
Mm-hmm. He's in my top. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Billy.
I was just telling him he didn't know no Martin Luther the King. Eddie Murphy barbershop humor.
Aren't they making a part 2 to that movie?
They can't quote the rest of that scene, so that's why I just had to leave you hanging.
About to come out.
But yeah, no, I totally agree, Mitch, because he's in my top 3 best voices of all time.
Yeah.
So the pick I'm going to go with, my man right here, Mr. Billy Paul. And this is a best of, just kind of a greatest hit. So I'm, cheating right there with you, Mitch. But Billy Paul, I mean, most people tend to know him from, of course, his big hit, Me and Mrs. Jones, which was a fantastic song. But I mean, he had a lot of great songs that just didn't necessarily become hits throughout the course of his career. He was kind of more of the definitely R&B, but there was somewhat of a jazz twang to some things that he did, which I think didn't really allow him to kind of pop in that 70s R&B crowd at the time. But he had a long, fantastic career, and until he passed away a few years ago, he had been touring all the way up to the end. So he more than made his claim without question.
I thought for
funny,
sure,
Vinyl Guru said we need some pimp R&B. I actually thought about showing the Mac, but I wanted to just show one artist because I love that album. But
I was thinking for sure, Brandon, that you would, one of your 2 picks would be Al Green.
Why?
I mean, Al Green's killer, man.
Yeah, I mean, when you really start getting into that old school stuff, there are, a good 10, 15 artists you can just, pull out without even thinking about it. And it's just legendary. And Al Green is definitely one of them. Mm-hmm. But I think why I kind of went with Billy was he's one of those artists, again, that just never get put into that same crowd with your Al Greens and your Otis Reddings or whatever the case may be. And another kind of interesting story about him too, and a lot of people say this is something that really harmed his career as well, was that when he was first starting to get a little bit of buzz, and he put on this show at this not a little hall kind of place in I think it was Queens. Don't quote me, but I think it was Queens. And so he invited some producers there to come check me out, and invited his wife and family and everybody to come down. And there ended up being this huge gang shooting that took place there, like during his show. And so all these rumors started to kind of spread that he was involved with it. He helped set it up, and and they kind of put this little stain on him. And I think that really kind of hurt him quite a bit right at the time his career was really starting to skyrocket a bit. So it's kind of weird. It's definitely kind of a strange story.
For assault too. Didn't he have a bunch of stuff with his wife, beating up his wife and stuff like that?
I don't know. I don't know about that. But yeah, I mean, just I guess like a lot of artists going through some crazy stuff, and he definitely had his fair share for sure. But yeah, fantastic artist.
Yeah, Miss Lady Soul said Donny Hathaway. I love Donny Hathaway. I wish I had some stuff on vinyl. I don't have any of his albums.
His live album is fantastic. I think that's probably the first one to go to. And music on vinyl has a pressing of it that just sounds amazing. You really like.
Yeah, I got to grab that.
All right. We're moving on to the next category. Now we're going to go to let's do punk. Let's take the energy up a notch a little bit in terms of artists. Phil, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I'll go first.
All right.
Again, I'm no Vinyl Richie when it comes to punk, man. I'm pretty straightforward, just barely dipping my toes in the punk, but I definitely can appreciate it, and much more mainstream, I guess. Blondie, Parallel Lines. I consider Blondie punk. I don't know about you guys. Do you guys think that Blondie would be classified as punk?
I think her music, I don't think the music is punk. I think her attitude and everything they brought to the table is right in that category.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
I think it's probably just because that's where I guess they kind of started was in the punk field, and so definitely the attitude is there even through the music. But I still love that album. I thought that was kind of going to be the honorable mention.
Yeah,
this
no
is just
problem.
one of my all-time favorites here. Little easy pick, simple, kind of a cop-out pick. But when I knew
it's great.
Yeah.
I said it's easy pick because it's great.
It is great. And that's what I was saying is when I knew I was going to pick the Ramones, then it came down to, well, what album am I going to pick? You know, is it going to be Rocket to Russia? Is it going to be Road to Ruin? But this one for me is the one that I'm constantly going back to. You know, so many great songs in there. I think even I don't know. I can't pick one. Sheena's a Punk Rocker is probably my favorite one on here. The only one I kind of want to skip, but you don't skip stuff on albums, is Surfing Bird. That one wears me out.
Yeah, man.
Nice.
Blondie,
pretty basic when it comes to punk. I mean, I could have picked, some Dead Kennedys and things. I might have a bunch of it, but I don't listen to it all the time, so I couldn't speak at any great lengths on that stuff.
Yeah, I think both of those were about as good as you can get. I mean, that's legendary right there.
That's where we're going to go next.
All right, go for it, Steve.
So this and hip hop were by far the hardest for me to choose from because there's 100 albums I could choose for punk as top albums. So my runner up is actually a little bit later, but was extremely influential in the early 90s. And it's one of my all-time favorite albums, but this is Operation Ivy. So Operation Ivy, they were the first major band to bring ska punk to the forefront. They weren't the first band to do it. There were a couple smaller bands, none of them that released albums though. They were the first one, and basically single-handedly led to what the ska punk and the ska movement, the third wave ska of the early 90s. And then of course, when the band split up, two of the members went on to form Rancid, who were extremely influential themselves. So if you guys haven't heard this album, this is actually their album and their EP together in one. It's phenomenal. Nothing really sounds like this. And there's at least 7 or 8 songs on here that are huge hits. Take Warning is probably the big radio hit. And if you guys heard it, you would probably know it, whether you know this band or not. So that's my runner up.
I was going to say, I wasn't familiar when you showed up, but Mitch obviously had a boner over it. So
yeah. That album changed my life, man.
It's great. I'll have to check it out.
And then my main album, and again, this was one of the hardest ones for me to pick. This album was recorded in 1979, but didn't get released until 1996. Yes. And it's Static Age from the Misfits. I absolutely love this album. This is not the horror punk that they would become known for. This is just straight up 70s punk. I love every song on here. This didn't get released until the Coffin Shaped box set came out, which I bought. That was my introduction to this. A couple months later, the album came out. And when I got back into vinyl, this was one of the first albums that I picked up. I love the Misfits, but I really love this early stuff before they went the horror punk route.
But I'm glad you pulled that because really a lot awesome of people are. What's that?
What were you saying?
Oh, I was just saying I'm glad you picked that because a lot of people in the comments they're pulling out the Misfits.
Yeah. Well, and it's not the obvious pick for the Misfits. Most people would probably pick one of the horror punk albums, and I love those albums too. But this was the album that started it, and it's definitely one of my all-time favorites. But like I said, there's dozens of punk albums I could have chosen. It's a genre that I love. But yeah, that's what I went with.
Nice
pick.
All right,
Steve. Whenever Billy and I talk about the Misfits, I always make a joke that if you added about 6 songs as bonus tracks on the end of Static Age, I would be set.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. Yeah. And that Coffin Box, I know it goes for crazy money now. I wish I wouldn't have. I did something stupid. I was DJing back in the late 90s and the early 2000s in Japan. And I had to be mobile. I was using CDJ 1000s. They were the first CD mixers that you could scratch with. And because I didn't want to have cases, I got rid of all my cases and just kept the discs in those books. And I ended up throwing away that Coffin Box. I don't know what I was thinking. And now they go for crazy money, But the stupid shit you do,
Right. Especially when it comes to CDs, we've all, golly, how many of us just threw that stuff away, or you had the albums and you cut the back jacket so you could slide it in so you could see the track listing. It's like,
what as a DJ, I literally had over 1,000. I probably had 1,500 CDs that I brought with me to the clubs in those books. And just having that stuff, I had it stored in a closet for years. And finally, I was like, why am I keeping this shit? And I threw it away. And literally within months of throwing it away, I decided to stop DJing. And I was kicking myself for throwing all that stuff away. So it is what it is.
Yep. All right. So, Mitch, what'd you come up with? What were your 2 picks for punk?
So I'll start with my honorable mention. Angry Samoans. This is 82. I haven't showed this stuff on my channel yet, but early March I came across a really badass punk collection. I've been listening to this record since I was probably in 8th grade. Just wanted to show you guys. This is an OG on Bad Trip. Real quick, just because it's honorable mention, Angry Samoans were the first punk band I got into after I got into hardcore. So I had really found Operation Ivy was instrumental into me finding the Bay Area scene. And I'd grown up listening to metal with my dad, but I didn't realize that there was other kinds of music that was that fast and arguably, in my opinion, heavier. And so when I dove in, coming back around to the Angry Samoans, where they're writing songs about, poking your eyes out or stabbing somebody with a steak knife, or how you hate your dad, but you still have to take the trash out if you want to live under his roof. It was just more sarcastic. It had a lot less anger and more of a sense of humor. This is my number 1. So this is Minor Threat. This is a first press from 84, I believe. So this is a compilation of their first 2 7-inches. This band, and specifically the lead singer, Ian MacKaye, just been a really huge influence on my life. But when I first heard bands like Operation Ivy, and got into Rancid, and then was exploring the Bay Area stuff and got into Dead Kennedys and such, a buddy of mine handed me a CD of Minor Threat's first demo tape, and it just blew my mind. It was 14-year-old kids playing faster than they had any business doing and being pissed off, and I was 14 and pissed off, and I listened to this album for months straight.
It's funny you talk to Ian MacKaye. I almost showed the Fugazi debut or the Fugazi EP.
Yeah.
I love everything Ian MacKaye's ever released, but yeah, that's a great pick. I didn't even think about Minor Threat.
I think if What the Hell Is That had a look or a face, it would be this. This particular genre for me was one that I knew I was gonna not only have trouble with, because I'm like way down here when it comes to the punk stuff. I mean, it's not that I don't appreciate it, don't enjoy it. I've just never really been exposed to it on a broad spectrum, So just to see you get excited about things like that, kind of, and I think the way you explained it, Mitch, was great. Want to hear it.
I don't want to bogart the conversation, but I feel you on that, Billy, because I think if you switch the tables between punk and metal, you'll see in a minute my two metal picks are super cliche, I guess you could say. It's very basic, classic, surface level. But yeah, that music just means an awful lot to me, and I grew up listening to it. That anything you discover between the ages of 12 to 15 is obviously going to be really, really formative in your musical taste. And like I said, finding that punk collection earlier in March and having some opportunity to hold near mint all around OG pressings, that it was moving. I didn't cry, but I felt like I was going to. I never thought I was going to be able to hold a first pressing of anything on Discord that would actually be able to be put on my table.
Yeah, I mean, I know just in talking with you about that, how excited you got, and I was, and trust me, I was excited for you, even though it wasn't. I'm like, I'm not familiar with this. I'm not familiar with that. I knew it was something that obviously meant a lot to you.
Yeah, it's so funny too, because every time I see that cover for that Minor Threat, it reminds me of one of the early lessons I learned with vinyl collecting. Because I bought a reissue of that, put it on my turntable. I was listening, jamming out, had to run out, turned off the stereo, and just happened to leave it sitting with the sun shining right on top of it. When I came home later, that album looked like this. I mean, that was an early lesson about protecting my albums from the sun and putting my turntable in a better spot.
Yeah.
Man, oh man.
Oh man. All right, so I'm up now?
I think so.
All right. Well, I thought someone might pick the Ramones, so I did kind of put that back. So Billy, thanks for proving me right on that one. So the two that I went with was the first one here, which is Dot. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of that band before. They weren't huge or anything, but I definitely like them a lot, mainly because they are, at least this album, I can't even say I know a lot of the rest of the catalog, but it's one of those albums that is very listener friendly in terms of if you're trying to get someone into hardcore punk initially. This is just an album that doesn't have any amazing hit. Every single song is great. Some underlying melodies, still all of the same energy and delivery as any type of hardcore, album that you can listen to. So I thought I would put that as an honorable mention just to maybe share it in case someone's not familiar with it. But anytime it comes to, dealing with punk, first band I go to almost every time is this one right here.
Yeah.
The one and only Bad Brains. There's two bands always say, or two artists always say don't sleep on. Pat Benatar and Bad Brains. And you never see those two coming together in any world outside the Mr. Hall of Fame's world. But yeah, Bad Brains, especially the live album, this is just one of the absolute most musical bands ever. I mean, sure, they do fantastic, great hardcore, but they can come back just fast and do, amazing reggae. They can come back just as fast and do, quite frankly, metal. Like there's really no genre that they can't touch and don't touch it well. So I had to put Bad Brains in there, and Live is probably definitely my favorite album by them. Favorite song is the live version of Reignition off of this album.
And they were a great band. I talked about that, I think, when you and I were streaming, Billy, but I saw them live open up for the Beastie Boys on the Ill Communication tour, and they were phenomenal live. They were so good. And then after their set was done, they jumped out in the audience, and they were in the audience with us watching the Beastie Boys, and they were in the mosh pits. And I think what's his name was already sick at that point. He was already having medical problems even back in the 90s, and he was still out there in the pits, probably in his 40s at that point, maybe late 30s. And yeah.
Not me.
It ain't me.
That whole that whole DC scene, though. I mean, Minor Threat was part of it. You had Henry Rollins, who would go on with Black Flag, and that whole DC scene was amazing, though.
I think when you and I were talking about that the other night, Steve, in our stream, Brandon joined us there for a minute, and I think he might have either dropped out or didn't see the comment. But when we were talking about that, I actually asked if that was the album you brought over here, Brandon. Was that the one you brought over when we had our listening party, the last one?
Yeah, I think it was Alive.
Yeah, so killer. So killer.
Some other bands people are mentioning are Black Flag and did you show both of yours, Brandon? Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
Black Flag. Some people are mentioning the Stooges. I thought about showing the Stooges debut, but we just talked about that in our last stream, so I kind of left it alone. Sham 69, another great one. Minutemen. I love the Minutemen.
Yeah.
I think I shared a Mike Watts story in that last video too. He was the bass player for the Minutemen and got booed off a stage when he opened for the Deftones.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's interesting, Steve, that you saw Bad Brains open for the Beastie Boys, because I think after that tour, Bad Brains record label Roar, the hype sticker on all those vinyl reissues always had one of the guys from the Beastie Boys quotes, this is the best hardcore album of all time. It was like they were using the relationship between the Beastie Boys and Bad Brains to kind of introduce that music to a new generation.
At their peak was Ill Communication was just so big. I mean, the Beastie Boys were huge with Ill Communication, but with Ill Communication, but when man, that was just it was great.
I think I actually mentioned it to Mitch when we were talking the other night. I don't think I've mentioned it to either Brandon or Steve. If you guys haven't seen the Beastie Boys documentary that just dropped like last week on Apple TV, check it out. Phenomenal. Spike Jonze. It's amazing.
Steve,
right.
while we're here, just a side note: if you wanted to do a tag team stream on your channel on just DC bands, that would be real fun.
Oh yeah, could probably do that. Well, Ian MacKaye was in half of them, so
yeah, that's fine.
Oh,
all right. So let's move on to probably the one genre I was most curious about, seeing what you guys picked. Because I tend to associate all three of you very much with this genre. So talking about metal, of course. So Mitch, why don't you start us off this time, man?
Sure. Honorable mention.
Nice.
What else do you need to say about this? I think this is the kind of metal I grew up around. And it just never gets old to me. Growing up, being a teenager in the early 2000s and being around and getting into music after the digital kind of revolution in recording, and being familiar with Pro Tools and tricks such as quantization. I can't believe that this album and really all of their material isn't a fucking computer. This band is ridiculously tight. it sounds fake. And I mean that in the highest form of flattery I can. Invaders is probably my favorite metal bass line of all time. But I had to go with this guy.
Yeah.
Oh yes, autograph copy.
Yeah,
going off.
You know, I'll be that guy for a minute, Billy. Fortunately or unfortunately, I cannot pull any Dio album from the collection I inherited from my father without it looking like this. So
Yeah.
this is the it was either pulling this or the Japanese copy, and I know that we've got some plans on Japanese stuff coming up soon, so decided to pick this. But man, my opinion, best metal frontman of all time. The lyrics, it's just awesome. Like they're not serious. It's like wizardry and mystic. It sounds like this is a soundtrack to playing Dungeons and Dragons. You know what I mean? The fuck are you talking about riding a tiger, right? But it's still super heavy. It gets me super jazzed. Yeah, I love this one.
Nice.
Kind of figured that's where we would go, but yeah, those are both great picks. Both.
Oh yeah.
I think with this genre in particular, for me, it's one of those things that we could. I was jacked to see this because there's so many great albums, at least to me, as well as so many great obscure albums. Not just the popular stuff. I mean, I know you said, Mitch, you kind of felt like you were kind of just going to show cop-out albums, but man, by no means were those cop-out albums. Those are two killer albums.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to be drawn really heavily to new wave of British heavy metal or stuff that was spun off around that era. I don't know what it is, but it's like we were talking about earlier with you and punk. It feels like a duh to pull a Dio album or a Maiden album. Mm-hmm. The deepest I really get is probably stuff like Diamond Head, which again, new wave of British heavy metal. When you guys are showing stuff on your channels, or you know, Billy and I will be texting and be like, "Oh man, have you heard the new Overkill album or something?" I'll be like, "Nope." So yeah, I have a very, in my opinion, rudimentary understanding of metal as a genre, and you know, most of that stuff in my collection, of course, comes from my dad, and I don't know, there's just something about that traditional heavy metal for me where I think it's the vocal style that I prefer. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of other metal that I could probably get really into from an instrumental standpoint, but I can't deal with like the guttural screaming or just other types of, or real sludgy stuff too. It's kind of depressing to me, but yeah.
Yeah.
So not to get too far sidetracked here, but real quick, just because since you're still kind of discovering what you like about metal and going down different avenues and lanes. I mean, do you find yourself? I know you said more of the traditional, you know, new wave of traditional heavy metal, but where do you lean when you start talking about thrash or things like that? I mean, I know you like Metallica and Megadeth, you know.
Right. Metallica was really not a part of my childhood. My dad preferred Megadeth by like, you know, power of 10, and I'm that way still. And I think honestly, Metallica falls into a category of musicians. I can think of like Bob Dylan is in this category too, where being in high school in the early 2000s, there's always that age, I feel like, is when people really start to discover quote unquote classic rock, the stuff that, you know, is kind of considered your mainstream fare. You know, I remember being a little kid and being like, "Dad, Dark Side of the Moon is so good." And he's like, "Yeah, you idiot." So, but the Metallica and Bob Dylan specifically, there was just always these fanboys, you know, there's always that one guy in school that like the only thing he listens to is Metallica, just over and over and over again. And I think that honestly turned me off. But I love Pantera. I'm not super familiar with their earlier stuff, but I like their later stuff. I don't and I'll say
that's sitting there. That's not one of my picks, but
I prefer Anthrax over Slayer. I don't know. Is that helpful, Billy?
Yeah, definitely kind of shed some light on things. So I know that, Steve, you said that's not one of your picks because you're getting ready to box that up and send it my way, right?
That's not an original. I wish it was.
That's the last thing I'm looking for to complete my Pantera collection right there.
That's one of the bootlegs. I just won that on one of the raffles on on YouTube or on Facebook, you know, where you $3 a bit or whatever, and I ended up winning that one. So
what are your thoughts on
like $40?
I mean, what are your thoughts on that album? I mean, I'm just gonna get it because I'm a completist, you know, but I really can't.
That's my least favorite Pantera album by far. So yeah, and we talked about Pantera. You know, I go a little. What's Steve was trying to? It's definitely my least favorite though.
Yeah, same here.
But I also struggle with like, where's the delineation between what's considered hard rock and what's considered heavy metal? Like,
it changes though. You know, Aerosmith used to be considered heavy metal, you know.
Right. Like a band.
Nobody would consider a metal at this point, you know.
Like Budgie, you know, obviously like really influential to bands like Metallica, but does that band come up in a metal conversation, or is it more of a hard rock situation?
Originally, they were a heavy metal band, and then about early 80s, when metal got heavier, a lot of those 80s or a lot of those 70s metal bands started becoming known as hard rock bands. So
right.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times too, when you have those genres that evolve as well, you know, whatever the new thing is they evolve to, all of a sudden it pushes the old thing out because the new standard has kind of gone to another level. So I've always just said, when it comes to classifying bands like that, you just go with how you feel it, period. You know, I mean, there's a ton of stuff in my hard rock section that people say should be in metal and vice versa and all of that, but it's, hey, that's how I feel it. If it doesn't feel metal to me, I'm not going to put it in my metal section.
That's why I mean, you've been over, Brandon and Mitch. I've got hard rock and heavy metal together because to me that it feels natural. That's how I group it, you know.
Yeah.
I got Ted Nugent next to Overkill. You know,
it's also something I want to bring up too, is like that heavier stuff that might, like you were saying, Brandon, would have been considered maybe metal in the 70s, but then kind of got demoted as far as the ranks of heaviness go. I also wonder, when it's music that you've heard over and over again, that's maybe, you know, a staple on classic rock radio. For a good example for me that's coming to my mind right now is like Stranglehold by Sweaty Teddy, right? Like that's a pretty heavy guitar riff, but you've just heard it a million times because it could be playing at your local grocery store at this point. And so some of that stuff, I think we just become so familiar with it that a lot of the people that are into heavier stuff, whether you kind of branch off into the punk side of the tree or the metal side of the tree, really try to dig deeper and go to stuff that they haven't heard or is heavier than what they're really, really familiar with.
Yeah. Well, kind of, how old are you, Mitch?
I'm 30.
Okay. So metal's kind of funny too, because if you grew up in the 80s listening to metal, I mean, I remember in high school where we got, or in school in the late 80s, we got shit on for listening to metal or wearing metal shirts, or people would spit on you. I mean, metal was hated back then. A lot of it was the satanic craze of the 80s, and then in the 90s it kind of became more mainstream, you know. And now it's funny to hear, you know, metal albums or metal songs on radio commercials, you know, or on TV commercials.
Yeah,
you know, it's amazing how that transition has happened. So
yeah, I mean, you can almost use the same comparison of like the you know, when Elvis first comes out and is on TV, and it's like, you know, cut, can't show that. And even just fast forward to the 80s and you see, you know, Madonna performing like a virgin compare those two. All of a sudden they've been classified as being not too vulgar. She didn't get cut off, but Elvis did.
Yeah.
You know, all that stuff just kind of evolves, and music does the same thing.
Well, then she got cut off too when she did "Justify Your Love" or "Justify My Love," whatever that song was.
Right.
Yeah.
And now you look back at it, and even that's not as risque as it was in what was it, 1989 when that came out?
Something like that.
The other thing I'll ask you guys real quick before we keep the ball rolling is I think like in the people that I'm familiar with in the VC, there tends to be a pretty large contingency of metal fans, especially guys about your guys' age that grew up in the 80s and are really drawn to that stuff. And I think me, even though I grew up in a house that was drenched in that type of music, being removed enough from it to really question like what heavy metal, or even if we want to just use, power metal or hair metal as a term, what music in the 80s is going to be timeless. You know what I mean? I think there's like a lot of times I'm watching a video in the VC and somebody will talk about how much they love Wasp. Is Wasp cool? Sure. Are my grandkids going to know who Wasp is? I don't think so. Will they probably hear a Motley Crue song? Sure.
Here's what I always say.
I'm not saying one's better than the other. I'm just saying that there's a large contingency of guys who are really deep in knowledge and really deeply sentimentally attached to that 80s metal. That
you hit it on the head.
Here's the thing, though. Even the Beatles, who were arguably one of the biggest bands of all time, and Led Zeppelin, who were arguably one of the biggest bands of all time, younger kids now couldn't care less about either of those bands. And, two of the most influential bands. And Velvet Underground, probably one of the most influential bands of all time. Even people our age know nothing about them. I think it's all fleeting. I mean, you look back, music's been around for forever. And you look back to the early stuff of the 1900s, how much of that is still around? You got your Robert Johnsons, you got your Lead Bellies. There were hundreds of artists that were on the radio and putting out 45s back then. Almost none of it is still around today, Yeah. And even those may not be around if it wasn't for Eric Clapton propping up Eric Johnson so much, or so many people covering Lead Belly songs, so I don't know. 100 years from now, maybe two of these bands that we've discussed will be known.
Right.
Yeah, I just think it's great how a lot of that stuff is coming around now, Mitch. Kind of recycling that is the nostalgia for 80s. All things 80s at this point. And it's really just because of where we are figuratively or collectively as a group. Brandon and Steve and myself, we've just gotten to that point where in our lives, in our careers, where we've got a little bit of disposable. We've worked hard. We've got a little disposable income. So we're trying to reach back and grab that the past, and the youth. And I think a lot of it too, though, is a lot of these our kids in the next generation love bands like Van Halen or Motley Crue. I mean, you can tell just by the popularity of the Netflix documentaries and things like that are coming out. But yeah, I think it's great. Or even a more what a lot of people would consider an obscure metal band in Motorhead, other than their couple huge hits, they're more popular now than ever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I knew this topic or this genre.
I was just getting ready to say that.
It's great.
I think we're going to go just as deep on the next one too. So
we haven't even who's went, who has shown. Are you?
I think only Mitch has. I tell you what, I'll go next and keep mine a little bit quicker. I'm going to go with. God, I even hate to say that this is an honorable mention, but I'm going to go with White Zombie, the Texas Devil Music Volume 1. One of the things that makes this album so special is when it first came out, I hated it with just a pure, deep passion. I remember I was in college at the time, and I was in the lounge with my girlfriend watching some, music video show, and the video for Thunder Kiss 65 came. And I so vividly remember this turning to her saying, "What is this crap?" Like, there's nothing musical about it. There's nothing creative about it, and just got hit at the song. Today, one of my top 5 favorite metal albums. Just totally won me over. And the thing I like about Zombie is the creativity. I mean, I think even when you start diving into his lyrics and stuff like that, it seems like he's just doing more of an expression as opposed to trying to, actually convey these deep messages and that type of thing. And then also the fact that he is so groove oriented. I never found it odd that down the line he ended up doing covers of I'm Your Boogeyman or doing Brick House with Lionel Richie. Like, that didn't seem weird to me because he's all about that groove. He's all about that funk groove. Yeah. He just has Five play it a little more distorted. So I think it's again awesome album. I can say a lot more about it, but again, that's the honorable mention.
Have you grabbed their box set?
I haven't grabbed that. I have one album, an original.
Make Them Die Slowly.
Yes, but I have not had the box.
The box set's amazing because because they started off as an art rock, like a noise punk band, really. Mm-hmm. And when you listen to those first few albums and hear them progress, you can slowly see them figure out what they would become with Devil's Music. And I agree. That's a perfect album. I could listen to that today and feel the same way that I did when I first heard it. And I've listened to that thing 1,000 times at least.
Yeah. And every time you listen to it, have you understood any more what any of the songs are about?
I know what the songs are kind of about just because I was so much into them when that came out. And actually, it's funny, Make Them Die Slowly is the album that got me collecting records again, because I actually ordered a copy of a CD copy off of eBay. I thought I was ordering a CD copy for like $6, and an original Caroline pressing of Make Them Die Slowly came in the mail instead. Oh, and I was so pissed off that I got the record instead of the CD. And then that ultimately led to me grabbing the record player from my dad's house because I wanted to spin that.
Yes, so, I remember you telling that story.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen every day. All right, so then my first pick is going to be this year.
Nice.
Wow.
Exodus. And this is on red vinyl, as you can see there. But again, one of the reasons why I picked this is it's not an Exodus album I hear talked about a lot. It definitely has my favorite song by them on it, which is Funeral Hymns. And I think what I like about that song so much is what makes this one of my favorite, if not my favorite, Exodus albums. And when it comes to metal, I know there's you can go pretty deep into it. New bands come around. Some people like bands that are more technical, that type of thing. What always draws me back into metal is just the good old-fashioned G-string palm mute and just everyone getting on a rhythm. It's almost like the most basic ABCs of metal, but that's the stuff that I appreciate so much more than even more of the technical type of stuff. So that's actually kind of what they brought on this album is, sure, they have some decent solos and a lot of, different type of things, but ultimately you just find so much straightforward rhythm palm muting throughout the entire album that it's just what I love. Just always what brings me to some of my more favorite metal albums, the rhythmic aspect. And that first 90 seconds of Funeral Hymns might be my favorite 90 seconds of the entire band of anything they've done on that album.
Any of those albums, I think, that you just mentioned, or any of those artists that you can put on when you're in the car and you just be driving along, and next thing you know, you're going 100 miles an hour. It's just you feel the music, and it's, like you said, it's the rhythm behind it. I totally feel you on that one. So I'm going to jump in here and go before Steve because I don't want to follow Steve on the metal. I can tell you that. So you guys, like I said, you've seen in all my other selections, I pretty well stuck with what showing as an honorable mention what everybody kind of would expect me to show. So you guys know this here is my all-time favorite heavy metal record, Megadeth, rest in peace. I think these guys were at the top of their game whenever this album came out. The first time I heard, Holy Wars, just unbelievable the way that thing hooked me right there. But so many great songs. Obviously, Holy Wars, Hangar 18, Take No Prisoners, Tornado of Souls, rest in peace, Polaris. This is my honorable mention. I could talk about that album for days. Matter of fact, I was watching videos the other night. It was like on MTV on Friday nights, I think, actually is now playing, like late on Friday nights, is now playing like Metal Mania or something. And you can actually, it's one of the MTV channels, and they play like 2 hours of classic metal videos. And they actually played Hangar 18. And I hadn't seen that video in years. If you're laughing because you remember how that video was. All the aliens in stupid plastic costumes and the Vic that looked like he was paper mache, kind of. It was just weird. But yeah, I love that. So my pick though, you guys picked. I think Steve picked Misfits earlier for the punk. And I'm going to go a different route with some Glenn Danzig. Not that I don't love Misfits or Sam Hain, but Danzig is my thing when it comes to Glenn and the boys. And this is just a classic, killer album. I hate to pull a Brandon here and be like what needs to be said about this album, but so seriously.
It looks like something needs to be sung about that album.
And I'm the wrong person to be singing.
Gold stamp promo.
Oh yeah, right. Gold stamp promo.
Was that the one? Didn't you find one of those albums at a Goodwill?
I did not find one.
Oh, okay. I don't remember who it was. I thought it was you for some reason.
No, but man, this is. I can't even pick a favorite song off this album. If I were to pick the first album, self-titled, I'd easily be able to pick a favorite song. But this album as a whole, not just the rhythmic heavy metal, like you said, a lot of the with John, the way he plays his sludgy, bluesy type approach, but a lot of his pinch harmonics as well. But this album's got all different kinds of influences on it, Very bluesy on this one too. Very much a blues rock metal album. I love it. It's one of my favorites.
All of their albums were super bluesy. John Christ was amazing.
Yes, he was. And it's a shame, he ended up getting in the accident that he was in. Well, it's a shame that he ever left the band or was able to leave the band in the first place. I think that was just that was crazy. Saw Danzig on that tour in Baltimore. There you go.
Everybody's talking about the Elvis album. Here you go.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Everybody hates it. I actually love it.
I love it.
Great.
I love it.
I love that it's deeper tracks too. There's only two, maybe three popular songs on there, but I hear everybody complaining and talking about how bad it is and talking about the production. I love all that stuff about it.
I think Glenn definitely did himself a favor in picking the tracks that he picked, those deeper tracks that maybe a lot of people who aren't diehard Elvis fans were very familiar with. He kept everything true to the originals too. The arrangements is pretty true to the originals. And while the production, I went into it with very, very low expectations, and I think you said the same, Steve. Went into it with very low expectations based on what Skeletons, which I know is you like Skeletons.
I like Skeletons.
Yeah. To me, I thought that was just the production turns me off on that.
He's only really had one release I didn't like, and it was what is it? Red something.
Yeah.
That's the only album of his that I haven't liked, and he's got a lot of deeper tracks on his later albums that are phenomenal. That people had already left. Actually, I take that back. Black Acid Devil's pretty bad. I can't. I saw him on that tour too, and even he didn't play anything off of that album, which is hilarious.
Really?
Yeah.
That's funny because I kind of like that album a little bit.
I didn't like 4 either, though. And now going back and listening to it, I like it now. But when it came out, and here's the deal with Danzig. How the Gods Kill is my favorite Danzig album. And for him to follow that up with 4, I just completely disappointed me. And then Black Acid Devil came out. And I was like, what is this crap? And after that, I started liking the stuff that you 777, or was it 777?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And Circle of Snakes had whichever album had White Angel, Black Angel is one of my favorite Danzig songs of all time. And but I like the Elvis. I've seen the reviews for it. Everybody's reviews talk about how horrible it is. It is what it is.
I think it's great. And I kind of in the same way as you, Steve, when you were saying you loved, your favorite was How the Gods Kill, Danzig 3. And then when Danzig 4 came out, you were kind of under enthused. I felt the same way going from 2 to 3. Now, looking back, How the Gods Kill, it's an amazing album.
Well, it's more bluesy than heavy metal. They went hardcore blues riffs on that one.
Yeah, so. Just the title track alone it's actually just a masterpiece of a track. I mean, the way they keep it down, build it up so powerful, and then bring it right back down. Matter of fact, it was even the way it was used in the remember the Kevin Bacon what was it, the TV show that was on? I can't remember where he was like the guy was he was chasing the cult leader. Anybody remember watching that? The Following.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, The Following. It was a few years back, and in the climax scene of that in the finale, where the cult leader is ended up, I won't give too much of it away, but it's the big climax scene. They're playing How the Gods Kill.
Really?
I was like, oh, man. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right, so I went pretty pedestrian with the first one. It's funny you mentioned Diamond Head, Mitch, because I had Diamond Head in my hand. The White Album from Diamond Head is one of the all-time great metal albums. But like Billy, my runner-up, I can't get this is, I think this is the best thrash album ever released.
Yeah.
And I love every other thrash band. This was it for me. I love Megadeth. I've seen them, I don't know, 7 times, more than probably anybody else. But I could not pick Judas Priest as my favorite. And I had to go with Killing Machine.
Nice.
Not a bad track on here. Rob Halford is just the metal god. It doesn't get much better. And even seeing him last year on the most recent tour, he still sounds amazing at 60 years old. He's still hitting those. Now you can tell he's struggling to hit the notes on Painkiller, but he still hits them.
Right.
And it was phenomenal. My wife is not even into heavy metal, and she was blown away by how good Judas Priest was live. So that is my number 1.
Yeah, no, that's great. When you showed that and you mentioned Rob Halford, I immediately went right back to Mitch saying that Ronnie James Dio was the best heavy metal frontman of all time, and I'm like, man, Rob Halford might have something to say about that. They're both fans, taking nothing away from Ronnie James, but man, Rob Halford's got to be.
I mean, what you just said about him still having the voice. When I saw him last year, he was actually sick that night.
Oh,
and
really?
And it was more than clear. I mean, he was barely able to move around stage. He was just really lethargic. They had even, people had mentioned after the show he had gotten rushed back to the hotel rooms. I don't know if it was flu or whatever, and still sounded absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, the only disappointing thing about that show was maybe his energy on the stage. But the band and Rob were on point.
Yeah.
Well, he's not moving. He's not as bad as Ozzy is, but he's not moving as well as he used to. Mm-hmm. And luckily Richie Faulkner's in the band now because he's got enough energy for the entire band. And I was so blown away by how good Richie Faulkner was. they were amazing. And actually, Mitch showed Maiden. I saw Maiden last year too, and it's one of the best shows I've ever been to. I was shocked, especially because I've got their last couple live albums. I didn't really like them, but seeing them live on this last tour was absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, that you got lucky, Steve. The legacy of the Beast tour didn't come here to St. Louis.
Yeah.
So Brandon and I didn't have an opportunity. Did the legacy tour come to KC? Mitch, do you know? Are you aware?
Well, how many years ago was that?
That
Last
was
year.
last year.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I was working at a bar about a mile away from the big arena, the Sprint Center here. This would have been about 5 years ago. And I was driving to work on a Friday afternoon, and the bar district around the arena, for probably 9 blocks, did not see a single person not wearing a Maiden shirt that night. It was insane.
Yeah, you know, the last time they came here, Brandon, was on the Book of Souls tour, I believe, and that was a weird time to see Maiden live. I think that album, it is a great album, but I think they featured too much of that album in the live set, and they kicked aside so many great standards.
Yeah,
they brought back, right, Steve? They brought back.
Not just that, they did the Klansman, which was a Blaze Bayley song.
Yep.
And I remember doing a video maybe 6 years ago where I talked about the Blaze Bayley era. And I remember mentioning in that video that I would love to see Bruce Dickinson do the Klansman, because I think it's one of the best songs that Maiden has ever released. And to see him do it was phenomenal. So
it's great that you mentioned the Blaze era stuff, because, you know, the Blaze era stuff, especially in the vinyl community, I've noticed gets shit on a lot. And I do enjoy the Blaze era stuff. I mean, you got to take it for what it is, though. You know, you can't compare it to the Diano stuff or the Dickinson stuff.
I just like the Ripper Judas Priest.
Ripper Priest stuff, right?
Love both of those albums with Ripper.
Yeah.
And they totally get shit on.
Yeah.
I'm glad I bought them when I did, because now both of those albums are going for stupid money. It's so insane.
Mm-hmm.
But and actually, one thing I didn't like about Dio is if you listen to Dio singing Ozzy songs, I don't like the way Dio sounds singing the Ozzy era Black Sabbath. When you listen to Ripper sing the Rob Halford songs, I think Ripper sounds just as amazing.
Yes.
And granted, he was in in a Judas Priest cover band,
right?
But he just really fit the bill, and he could sing those just as good as Halford could.
Yeah, that's taken nothing away from Ronnie James either, because, you know,
no, not at all.
He is what he is. And that's like saying, you know, you guys all know how I feel about Sammy Hagar and the Van Halen stuff. When Sammy would do the David Lee Roth stuff, Sammy's such a stylist that there's no way he's going to do it. Yeah, and that's the thing with Ozzy. Man, Ozzy's Ozzy. There's only one Ozzy, right?
I don't think I've ever seen anybody work the crowd like Ozzy used to. Yeah. And I really got to see the decline, because I saw him for the first time in 94 or 95. And he was all over the stage. He controlled the crowd. I mean, people would go crazy. I had never experienced anything like that before. And then to see him again in 2005, and then a couple of years after that, you could just see him degrade with each one of those shows. It's amazing that he's still alive. I mean, let's be honest.
Oh, I know.
And he could barely move back in the 90s. You know, he was still already really stiff.
Mitch, don't be listening to Ozzy anytime soon.
Right?
And I thought about pulling out the box set and grabbing No More Tears and showing that one tonight. But I mean, these are two. And actually, one of my all-time favorite metal albums, I didn't show tonight because it's going to be in the next live stream that we do next weekend.
Okay.
Right, nice.
You know that we spent. I'm looking at the clock here. We spent 50 minutes talking about heavy metal. But hey, we kind of so I knew that was going to be the longest thing we talked about. But I honestly, I'm kind of stoked about the next one, because I think it's going to be probably one of the most interesting. And I'm pumped. I can't wait.
I'm surprised you put that one over your shoulder right there and not in your lap.
I know.
Or you have the other copy.
I sleep with a copy of this album, man.
It's kind of what I thought about it too. Is I had a fairly, I guess, decent idea of what I thought everyone might pick for metal, but on this one I have like no clue which one might be pulled out. But the last genre is going to be hip hop. So actually, I'll just put out who's dying to go first. Okay, I will. I still don't know which one is the runner-up, and I'm just gonna go ahead and just grab this first one and make it the runner-up.
I feel the same way, dude. I either one of mine could be that.
And it is Audio 2. If anyone has ever heard of that group before, but the album is called What More Can I Say? This is a 1988, so I mean it's still kind of part of that early hip hop, but it's almost even kind of hard to describe. This is still that point in time where it was okay to be a little funny and a little silly in your, in your hip hop delivery. I always say you can almost categorize most hip hop. It's a very fine line between when you were allowed to smile on album covers and then when you weren't allowed to smile on album covers. It was like
1988. NWA ruined it for everybody.
How low did your pants sag?
Exactly. But this is one of those albums where, I mean, maybe he's not doing as much, but you could smile on the cover. But still, it was very creative. The lyrics were there not only to show what the type of MC he was, but just as much to make you smile and laugh and just kind of enjoy the music itself. Again, a lot of great tracks off of here, but my favorite still have to go with Top Billin' and What More Can I Say? If you haven't heard anything off this album, that's definitely the one to check, or the two songs to check out. That's the honorable mention. The one I have to go with, and I put a lot of albums back to pick this one here.
Nice. Dude, I came so close to grabbing that one, dude.
Oh my gosh. You talk about when you use that word timeless for an album, this is one. I mean, there are a number of pieces on this album that could come out or could have came out in the past 5, 6, 7 years that still could have found its place in hip hop. And the DOC was just one of the best things that happened to hip hop. And he was also one of those guys that really brought all the different styles within this album as well. Because whether you're talking about just the old traditional, trunk bass boom of songs like So Let the Bass Go, or songs like Beautiful or Deadly, where you have, rock guitars and that type of stuff in it. He just did it all. Absolutely.
You don't have G-Funk without DOC. He was one of the biggest parts of the creation of G-Funk.
Mm-hmm. And it was so sad with him too. Maybe for those that don't know the story, I mean, that album came out, he was blowing up, of course, NWA, because he was in fight with that group, if you will, and got in a car accident and shattered his
vocal cords. And
yeah. So is it the Chronic, or was it NWA's third album where they had those little interludes and you they're kind of playing a game show and all that, and you hear that really scratchy voice? Like, that's the DOC. It's not a joke. He
released another album later after the accident, it's a good album, but it's hard to listen to because of his voice. But lyrically, it's an amazing album.
Yeah, that was a huge blow to hip hop right there.
Yeah,
huge.
Brandon, were you with me when I actually found an OG copy of that here within the last couple of years? So I was thinking somebody was with me. I think it was at Planet Score Records.
No, it wasn't me, because I definitely would have said something or remembered that.
Oh yeah. And so the funny story about that is I'm flipping through the new arrivals, the thing got there. You know, the first bin when you walk in, and that's like the first thing that I see. I'm like, holy shit! You know, you don't see these OGs out, and it was quite fairly reasonable. But me being a tight ass, I'm always like trying to get the best deal I can. I'm like, hey, get any? You know, I had that and something else, and I go up to the counter, and he's like, oh man, great pick. And I'm like, yeah, you got any wiggle room on this? He's like, dude, that just came in 2 hours ago. No way. No way.
You know, another good story, kind of a testament to the timelessness of that album, is I was downtown. This was actually last summer, and was walking around, and this car came by and put the stoplight. We go across the crosswalk, and he's bumping the Formula by the DOC. So I mean, yeah, we all go back and listen to old things, but it's just, you don't drive around hearing people bump into the top, you know, loud as speakers can go, hip hop 30, 35 years ago. I mean, the album just doesn't fade. Great stuff. Great
album. Good pick. Good picks.
I'll stop rambling. I'm dying to see Hearst picked up here, but what you got, man?
Well, I'm gonna have to switch it up. I've been showing my honorable mention. My honorable mention first. I'm not going to switch it up. I'm going to keep it as it is. So I'll show my honorable mention first. So I could have picked this as my essential 80s album too. I mean, this album was a soundtrack to my youth. We strapped the boom box. It's okay if I call it a ghetto blaster, right? I mean, it was a ghetto blaster, man. That's what we called it then. We strapped the boom box to the front of the damn bicycle handlebars with bungee cords and wore that tape out. I mean, just, I don't even have to look. My Adidas, Peter Piper, you know, Walk This Way. It's just, that album still gives me goosebumps when I listen to it. It's still, I can put it on, and it doesn't matter what kind of mood I'm in, where I'm at, who's over here. Everybody gets hyped when you put on Raising Hell, Run DMC. And that's my honorable mention, man. I couldn't even begin to not pick this as my number one.
I thought that was coming.
Yeah, and I had to show the.
Some of the best videos came from that record.
What's that?
The videos for that record were awesome.
Oh yeah,
the Easy Does It video is classic.
Mitch was showing off with his signed copy of the Dio, and I wish I had anything signed by Easy, but this is my sealed OG copy with the the Tower Records sticker on it. You know, God, I love this. So this is one of those records. When I first got into hardcore hip hop, it was, I'm thinking I might have been about 14 or 15. I know I wasn't driving yet because I had the cassette, and my dad was taking us somewhere, and I had the cassette with me, and I'm like, Dad, can we play this? And my dad did not play that kind of stuff. I put it in, and he's like, what is this nasty shit? You know? And I'm like, oh, man, this is easy. I'm all pumped up for it, you know. And he's like, I don't care if you listen to this, but don't let your mom hear you listen to that nasty stuff, you know. But, yeah, that's – man, I can't even begin to explain how much that album means to me. And then, of course, this one over here. See, I'm still getting the backwards crossed up. This one here, man, that's the stuff. I'm gonna take a second and just this is the one. But I don't think Easy put out anything bad. I love it.
That's one of the best albums to bump if you have a system in your car.
Yeah.
That song hits so hard, but man, you can't go wrong with Eazy-E.
Yeah.
All right, so my number one pick, I mentioned to you guys before. I gave my copy to a friend, and I thought that I had another copy, and I don't. One of my all-time favorite albums was the Gravediggers' debut album. It's also one of the darkest albums, but it's absolutely amazing. The Gravediggers had Prince Paul and RZA and I can't even remember who else was in it. But phenomenal, kind of created the horrorcore genre. But so my runner-up, I actually found out during the same era. One of the record stores I went to back in the early 90s, had the new section that all record stores had. But they also had the recommended section. And there was one guy who I really trusted who turned me on to a lot of really cool stuff. That wasn't Phoenix is a very West Coast town. So I grew up with West Coast hip hop. I didn't get into the biggies and stuff like that until I was in the military, when I was around a bunch of New York guys. And that's when I got into Biggie and Black Moon and Smith and Wesson and that New York sound, This was one of the first groups that was outside of the West Coast. And he pointed out to me, he said it's different, but he thinks I'll like it. And I played this for the first time, and I must have spun it 60 times that first week. I couldn't get enough of it. And it's Southern Playalistic Cadillac Music.
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. I
like everything that they did through. I'm not a big fan of The Love Below. I know that's their big super hit. I love everything they released until that album, though. And this has nothing to do with the fact that I live in Atlanta now. This has been huge for me since the day it came out, and I love it. And if you guys haven't grabbed this Vinyl Me Please pressing of it, it's highly recommend that. Yeah, so that's my runner-up. So I had to go with this one. I can't find my record. It's in one of these stacks. I've been organizing everything, so I pulled out the CD. But this is my number 2 behind Gravediggers, and it's Bizarre Ride to the Far Side from the Far Side. I absolutely love this album. Let's see if I can get there you go. If you guys haven't heard this, it's absolutely amazing. Their big hit was off of their second album. It was Passing Me By, which is a great song too. By their second album, they had lost something though. One of the big issues with their second album is Imani, who has a really high-pitched voice on this. He decided to grow up and not do that high-pitched voice anymore. And they kind of lost something in that second album. And Fat Lip, I don't know if the drugs were already getting in the way, but Fat Lip, who was a big part of writing this album, didn't write as much on the second album. I love everything about this. When this came out, I had just I was DJing at the time. And this, Yamama and Other Fish in the Sea were huge requests when I was in the clubs. But then Pass the Pipe. The production on the Pass the Pipe's amazing. Not only is the beat amazing, Fat Lip is rapping in the forefront, and then in the background, kind of backed off as Imani singing the same exact lyrics. And the production just blows me away. And although this is extremely raunchy, which I loved in my 20s, I don't like as much now. I still get the same nostalgia or the same feeling when I listen to this album now as I did back in, 94 when this came out? I can't remember off the top of my head, but The Far Side, highly, highly recommend checking that out. If you guys haven't
so real quick, talking about the raunchy stuff, we can't not talk about the elephant in the room when you're talking about raunchy hip hop and rap, and it's 2 Live Crew. I've seen a bunch of people mentioning 2 Live Crew in the comments. That was another one that I kind of like you, Steve. I loved and thought it was so awesome back in the day, and still do get a little bit of a chuckle. But since I've got the albums and I spin them now, and I'm like, it's not quite as good as I remembered.
2 Live Crew were never a great album though, or never a great band. They had something, they kind of introduced the Florida sound, but they were never a great band. Luke was good. They were a good party band. Pop That Pussy was a huge hit. And their deeper cuts were better songs, but those weren't the ones that were going to be on the radio,
Yeah.
Right.
They were Sir Mix-a-Lot. Sir Mix-a-Lot, his albums were great if you listen to the whole albums, but the deeper cuts were never going to make the better songs were never going to make it on the radio.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. the Two Live Crew. My favorite is the Dirty Nursery Rhymes, man.
Yeah.
and like you said, they were a cast of characters. They really were, you know. And Luke was probably the best of the bunch as far as when it came to just straightforward rapper. You know, probably and he was definitely a pretty decent hype man too when it gets right down to it. And every rap group needs a good hype man, right?
Yeah.
Hip hop's a hard one though, man. There's literally 100 albums I could have chosen, and you know, it was really the hardest one for me to choose. Like I said, the Gravediggers would have been number one no matter what. I've heard that album 1,000 times, and I could hear it 1,000 more and still feel the same way. The Far Side's pretty much same Outcast, but I could say the same thing about Nas. I could say the same thing about Jizza. I could say the same thing about you know, countless others. I see, and some good recommend. People are mentioning Cypress Hill. The Cypress Hill debut, especially on the West Coast, it didn't get much bigger than that when that came out, you know. And actually, for that to blow up, that came out the same time the Chronic came out, you know. And I thought the Chronic was, you know, that kind of quieted everybody to everything. That was the track, you know, or that was the album. But for them to be able to niche out Cypress Hill at the same time was pretty big. But at the same time, man, you had the New York scene blowing up with Tribe Called Quest. Another one that I would love to have shown, but I can't find a copy on vinyl is Organized Confusion. Stress from Organized Confusion is one of the best albums I've ever heard. And, you know, if you guys haven't heard Pharoah Monch, before he became a solo artist, he was in Organized Confusion. And those albums are absolutely phenomenal as well. So,
yeah. And another name I see a lot of people mentioning over there in the comments is Too Short.
Yeah, I loved the first 3 Too Short albums. Everything else, I feel after that was just kind of chasing those first 3 albums. But and I think I showed Short Dogs in the House a while back when it was released for Record Store Day. Yeah, and I think that's still his best release. But any of those first 3 albums are worth having in your collection.
Yeah, I think Too Short is so legendary because to me, there's, you know, when you start getting into the hip hop genre, there's so many different ways you can go, and it's kind of hard to make yourself really stand out. You know, it's kind of hard to make yourself the next Cypress Hill, where, you know, as soon as you hear it, you know exactly who it is. There's no question. But I think Too Short just really laid such a foundation with that. I don't know the effects, but how he echoes his voice through all of his lyrics.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just classic, and it's nothing but, here's the bass, here's my lyrics. I'm going to do the same thing year after year after year. I'm not changing it up for anyone.
Yeah.
And it was actually one that I put back to pick those two because, I mean, it's Too Short.
Well, if you haven't heard him, Ant Banks as well, he helped produce those first few Too Short albums and helped write a lot of that stuff. Mm-hmm. And his first few albums were phenomenal as well. People are mentioning the Ghetto Boys. Man, the Ghetto Boys. I have Assassins sitting over there. And man, they're what? Oh man, that album with Minds Playing Tricks on Me is so good. But
here's a big question that I would have for everyone. I mean, if you know the Ghetto Boys, do you remember Willie D's first solo album?
Yeah, the one where he's sitting next to the car with the hat on.
The one that's on the front cover. Maybe it was his second album. Maybe it wasn't his first. On the front cover, it has a Klansman, a police officer, and a chick.
I think that was his second album. You may be his first.
That is the filthiest album you will ever listen to in your entire life. I kid you not. I mean, songs like "Fuck the KKK," "Ballhead Hose." I mean, and you dive into. I need some. You can finish off the last word. The filthiest song I've ever heard in my entire life. Huh?
Cupcake.
I mean, that album was so bad, you literally take it out of your tape deck and go, I got to put this NWA back in here.
Myself.
Like, holy cow, where's that Too Short Freaky Tales? I need to bring it down a little bit.
Did you ever hear, was it was it Little Big Man or the Big Man from Bushwick? His first solo album.
Don't think so.
It was really good too, and he kind of gets into the story of how he lost his eye and does a song about it. Phenomenal. Yeah, somebody mentioned Big Pun. Big Pun's debut is one of the best albums of all time. His second album was okay. Have you guys heard his son? His son is really good too.
Yeah, this is one of those categories that, like you said, there's so much great stuff, and I don't think we don't talk about a lot of this stuff. I mean, I know Brandon will show a little bit, and I'll show. I think I did one video where I showed my pretty modest hip hop art, rap and hip hop collection. But I definitely, it's not one of those things that I show very often because I don't add. I'm not constantly adding to the collection, and that's we tend to fall in that here in the VCs. We're only showing what we've picked up new, just got this one. And, but it's definitely something that I spin. I mean, I've probably got a couple hundred different hip hop records, and any one of those could have been picked. I almost picked the Predator.
That's a great.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But then when you go to pull the Predator out, then America's Most Wanted is next to it. It's like, well, how do you choose? Yeah, so much good.
So Miss Lady Soul mentioned Lady of Rage. The only Lady of Rage I remember was Afro Puffs. You remember that song?
Yeah.
From was it
Rage Rock? It's from the
soundtrack.
Yeah. Above the Rim.
Above the rim. There we go. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great one. MC Hammer. What else is people?
Hammer, don't hurt him.
MC Light was great. Yeah, Miss Lady Soul. I loved MC Light. I think
Light scared me
for her.
MC Light literally scared me. She's one of the few female rappers that her voice inflection and everything literally made me like, okay, I'm sorry, I won't do it again. I promise. She has had such power and delivery behind her voice. She was an amazing artist.
Boss too. Do you remember Boss from maybe 91? It was AMG's sister, and she did her own version of My Sister Is a Bitch with AMG. Do you remember that? Do you remember AMG?
Yeah, bitch better have my money.
Yeah, and Vertical. Yeah. Vertical Joyride from AMG, I think, is still one of the greatest hip hop beats of all time. Actually, that got used by Coolio on Fantastic Voyage. He borrowed that beat from AMG.
Man, Steve, you need your own hip hop rap, right? Dude. I mean, because
where I grew up, everybody sees me showing metal and stuff, but where I grew up, my metal introduction came from MTV and stuff. I grew up in the middle of the crack epidemic, in the middle of the gang, a very gang heavy area of Phoenix where I grew up. I'm from a mixed family, so hip hop was always there. I got into the other stuff more when I moved away. My mom saved up money and got us out of those neighborhoods, and she got us into a nicer area. It still wasn't a nice area, but that's where I really got into metal. That's where I met the guys that I was in my first band with. I listened to metal earlier on when I was into skateboarding when I was younger, but that was much earlier. So I was real heavy into hip hop. And like I said, I DJ'd for years, and I was DJing hip hop. I was doing some production stuff with some friends in Japan, guys that were from New York and LA. So I got a lot of stuff from them as well. Like I said, I grew up with the West Coast stuff, and then I went in the Navy and was introduced to stuff like Biggie and the whole plethora of bands from New York that I had never heard before. So I could go on. If you would have looked at my CD collection 10 years ago, it would have been 80% hip hop.
Oh wow!
And now it's maybe 5%.
Let Mitch talk about his just real quick. I want to. Andrew had mentioned the Chronic being a game changer, and I don't think any of us picked that just simply because I think if you're not familiar with the Chronic, I mean, you must be living under a rock. But for me, I love the Chronic, but I think I'm more partial to Chronic 2001.
Billy's basement always smells like Chronic.
What are we laughing at?
Because when you said you love the Chronic, Mitch just had to start cracking up. Then
Oh,
everybody
well,
else started
yeah,
cracking
Because your bass smells like the Chronic.
Yeah, he's been over here.
So yeah,
Go ahead.
we were talking obviously before we started streaming, and yeah, it was really disheartening when I was pulling stuff for this video to discover that a lot of the hip hop stuff that I thought I had at least on CD is not in my collection. So I'm hoping to, I would like to say that I hope I don't open Pandora's box, but I know it's going to happen, and I'm really excited to hear what you guys have to say. So my pick was definitely going to be Straight Outta Compton, and the reason for that is when I was skateboarding in late elementary school through middle school, a lot of the stuff that we were listening to was at first pop punk, and then it got a little heavier. Discovered Operation Ivy that Steve brought up earlier. Thank you, Brandon, for saving my ass.
right there. I figured I'd grab it for you.
But the other stuff that was popular at the time was a lot of, radio hip hop. A lot of my friends were listening to that stuff. So I was listening to stuff like Rancid and Minor Threat, and my dad knew that I was getting into heavier stuff. And my bedroom was right off the music room. So if you can imagine, like if you go over to Billy's house, if you're looking at Billy's, the direction Billy is facing right now, his daughter sleeps right off of the record room. It was the same situation for me. And so I was listening to it was like maybe 2004 or so. And I was listening to like Paul Wall and Mike Jones, T.I., and Lil Jon, and I still love that stuff. But my dad, I'll never forget it. He was doing something in the music room, and he heard me listen to my stereo, opened the door, and he's like, "What the fuck are you listening to?" And I was like, "It's rap, man." And he was like, "Yeah, I know." And he handed me NWA Straight Outta Compton. He was like, "If you want to listen to hip hop, listen to this."
Nice.
And I think what connected me to NWA in the first place was that same, and it's, I want to be very clear, I cannot relate to that area. I grew up very fortunate, but that same note of teenage angst that's present in punk and hardcore that I was listening to is still there when you listen to that early gangster rap, especially NWA. And so the ethos felt very much the same. It was still coming from a pissed off place. It was still fuck the system. It was still addressing a lot of societal issues, and it really stuck with me. And so then I personally, the way that, I was taught to listen to music was, okay, well, who are this artist's contemporaries and influences? Who are the members of this band? So then, of course, I started getting into the West Coast scene and was discovering stuff like Eazy, of course, Dr. Dre, Ice Cube, Snoop Dogg, all the G-Funk guys, Nate Dogg, and led me up to the Bay Area with Too Short, with E40. But I had a friend in high school named Nazim who grew up in Brooklyn. And anytime I had my headphones in, he would always be like, "What are you listening to?" And if it was West Coast hip hop, he would basically tell me to fuck off and be like, "You should be listening to Rakim. Why aren't you listening to Rakim? Why aren't you listening to Biggie? Why aren't you listening to Boogie Down Productions?" And so it really got me into both coasts, if you will. And I really can't pick a favorite as far as like those two contemporary scenes, but hip hop is always the Pandora's box I wanted to address. In the VC in particular, hip hop has never shown enough love, in my opinion. And I think, if I'm being honest, it might have something to do with like the largest contingency of record collecting is middle-aged white dudes who are like closed-minded to hip hop. I hear that a lot. Like, there's a lot of Facebook groups I'm a part of where somebody will post an absolute classic like Aquemini by Outkast, and some 65-year-old white dude will be like, "Those aren't musicians," It happens all the time.
You know what the issue is, though? So in the 90s, hip hop kept the record industry alive.
Absolutely.
We were DJing, and we were DJing records. Now most hip hop listeners don't listen to records anymore, so they're not out there.
That's exactly why
I go into huge record stores that have huge sections of everything, and when you get to the hip hop section, there's almost nothing there, and it's because a lot of the hip hop stuff just isn't being released to vinyl.
There's a store here. There's a store here in town that has a record room. It's huge, and they have a separate area downstairs from that main area where all the bins are. That's literally just hip hop mixtapes. It's all bootleg, local artists, people, rapping over some other popular beat, and tends to be. I think that's why I couldn't find any stuff on hard copy in my collection, because when I go to listen to somebody like Royce da 5'9", I don't pull out a CD. I go to Spotify. That's just where it's at. If I want to listen to Pusha T, I don't have it on CD. I'm going to pull it up and stream it. And I think that's the other thing too, is with artists like Drake and Kanye, for instance, kind of taking most of the hip hop pop radio spotlight, we're not talking about people like Pusha T. We're not talking about Clips. We're not talking about Anderson .Paak, who I think is absolutely incredible. Kendrick Lamar, of course. There's a lot of really positive, super funky, really kick-ass hip-hop coming out right now that's just not getting love because it's not mumble rap. It's not the Migos with the dab of ranch. You know what I mean?
Sucks, man.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right too, and it's so funny because the next two videos I have on my list to do, the Vinyl Guru just did a video about essential hip hop albums. It's a really good one too. She showed some great '90s stuff, and it made me think I want to go back and do an essential '80s hip hop. So that's going to be the next video I post in the next day or two, because even a lot of those people you rambled off, like Eric B and Rakim, and I mean, there are so many fantastic artists that, quite frankly, a lot of people just don't know about. If you didn't get hooked in your childhood, it's just the likelihood of you getting drawn in later as an adult is just not good.
Right.
I also think that I was fortunate enough to not only spend my time in barber college. I was literally the only white guy there for months and months at a time, and then I worked literally across the street from the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum and American Jazz Museum here in Kansas City, and again was the only white guy in the shop, and so I was able to be exposed to stuff that I was just not enculturated to be listening to, like Robert Glasper, for instance. Like the stuff he's doing with Jill Jones, that's magical to me. Mos Def would have never come across my radar unless I, if I would have been a little less stoned watching the Chappelle Show, maybe I would have remembered Mos Def, but it was a short-term memory loss. But I just
so funny. We have like reciprocal stories.
I just think I just really get frustrated, I guess, at the lack of respect, especially from people who hold classic rock, if we just want to use a real broad stroke, who hold that music to be sacred. They don't have a respect for rap and hip hop, and I think that's really doing themselves a disservice, because there's a lot of awesome producers in the first place, but the lyrical content, man, like I don't think there's another genre of music that when it's on and somebody's intentionally trying to get you to think about something is as effective as hip hop.
I remember an interview that a series that Ice-T did about like the world of hip hop. He was going around and introducing.
I know exactly. That was a great series. Yeah.
It was pretty cool. But they asked him the question about how come hip hop doesn't get the same respect as jazz and all these other genres and everything. And Ice-T was kind of honest about it. He was saying, yeah, the creativity is there and all of that. But he said, I think if we go back and if B.B. King was having beef with, Muddy Waters, and all the negativity that's associated with that, with the violence and the killing and all of that, he said, I'm not sure if jazz would have ever taken off because there's just something that just automatically pushed a significant group of people away from it. So it's kind of that balance between needing to understand, the reality that's being shared and the stories that normally are not being heard through hip hop, but then some people just being so turned off from it that they don't even allow themselves to get in and engage in it. And it just it was underground for the most part for so long,
I
Man,
think. Oh, sorry. Go
No,
ahead.
go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say Lavelle. I hope I'm saying that right. Mentioned that there's just not a lot of good hip hop, and that sadly, the stuff that's on the radio. I mean, if Kendrick was on the radio more often, some of J. Cole's better stuff was on the radio more often, things might be different. And what's special about Kendrick is he's not just a throwback to the '90s. He takes the jazz that was big in New York hip hop and mixes it with that West Coast lyricism. And it's amazing what he's doing. But
I agree, Steve. I always say, like, I know it's an older track now, but King Kunta off of To Pimp a Butterfly, if you would have pulled an Austin Powers and cryogenically frozen James Brown and then let him listen to the next 30 years of music and told him to put a song out, it would have been very similar.
Well, and what's crazy, the other thing about him too, and we mentioned Eazy-E, Kendrick did that award show live set where he starts off in a prison cell and the whole prison is behind him. And that's straight from Eazy-E, from one of the Eazy-E videos. And everybody's talking about how innovative he is. And he's just bringing back the stuff he remembers as a kid from the 90s. And people talk about how innovative it is. And it is the way he's doing it. But people don't realize the history of it either, which is kind of sad. So
Vince Staples is like a very similar situation, in my opinion. I don't know if you're familiar with Vince Staples, Steve, but like he very much, to me, sounds like he could have easily been hanging out with any of the guys from the G-Funk era. He's from Long Beach. He just had it's just like, it doesn't sound derivative. It just sounds like he was steeped in that stuff throughout his whole life,
I hadn't heard any hip hop in years that piqued my interest until I saw the Kendrick Lamar video where he's getting drunker and drunker as the video goes on. One of the best hip hop songs of the last 20 years. I can't think of the name of it.
Cool.
Yeah, there we go. Just so good. And there's just not a lot of that anymore. I mean, and we kind of look at the 90s with rose-colored glasses. There was a lot of shitty stuff. Most of the pop rap that was on the radio was not very good. It was Positive K and it wasn't great, but there was some amazing stuff mixed in at the same time, whereas I don't see as much of that now. You don't see the amazing lyricism mixed in with all of the pop hip hop that is, basically what trap music is and the mumble rap and everything else, but I would say even the pop rap back then lyrically was better than what we have today, so I will say the beats and stuff of today are really good, and that's what keeps it going, is because people want it for the clubs, but there's not the content to it. So yeah, Tyler the Creator, I don't get into Run the Jewels, but I've heard their stuff. Some other comments that people are Tupac, a bunch of people are bringing up Tupac. So I always anger people with this. Tupac is another rose-colored glasses type of guy. He blew up. He really blew up after he died. So growing up in the West Coast, in that area, everybody used to make fun of Tupac when his first album came out because he was a dancer for Digital Underground. And that was like the big joke, that he went from being the dancer to the super thug. And people did really make fun of him and laugh about him a lot. And then what's the Black Album with him on the cover? Is that All Eyes on Me?
All Eyes on Me.
Yeah.
It was really that album where he started to blow up. His first couple albums had some great songs. But it was really All Eyes on Me. And now people, if you say anything negative about Tupac in the music industry now, people attack you like it's the worst thing you can say, which I think is kind of funny, because if you grew up during that time frame, things happened a little bit differently than people tend to remember. Even people that used to talk trash about him, I see in magazines and in interviews talking about how amazing he was and how important he was in 1992 when he came out, when those same people were talking shit about him back then. So
that's what I was looking for back in the back. Brandon, you remember sending this to me, right?
Of course.
I think this is one of those underrated 90s hip hop albums, man. I mean, dude, still out there doing it too. Still out there doing his thing.
Plus, he was in Blank Check, one of the greatest movies of the 90s.
He did. Do you guys remember the cartoons, the Fern Gully cartoon?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
He played the lizard. He did a bunch of voiceover stuff back in the day too. He was always around.
What a voice, though. I mean, it's so natural, you know. Just definitely progression.
Okay, a few vinyls mentioned in Jay-Z. So Jay-Z has had a resurgence. Beyonce definitely saved his career. His first two albums, actually his first four albums, are absolute classics. I don't like anything he's released since then. He's had some songs that I've liked. I liked Is It the Story of OJ? I thought that was an amazing track. I haven't liked the full album of his, though, maybe since the Black Album.
Right.
I would say that was his last great album. And even the album before that, I didn't really like that much.
Well, since Billy kind of cheated and just pulled another record out of nowhere.
Well, you had it.
I had to pull this out because it's right here to my left. Everybody's going to start cheating now, but we're going to get this deep into hip hop. To not mention Eric B. and Rakim is almost sinful. I mean, now not on this album, but of course the song "Paid in Full" is one of the most legendary, I think, tracks in all hip hop period. Everybody knows it. It was completely groundbreaking when it came out. But Rakim, just as an MC, period, he's one of those guys where when you interviewed him, he's answering your questions in the interview, and it sounds like he's rapping. It's just that it's the way he pronounced his words. It just flowed off his lips so smooth. And this album right here is, oh my God! If you start a hip hop collection, an old school hip hop collection, this better be one of the first 5 albums that you buy. I'll be showing up at your door in ways you don't want me to. Follow the leader, microphone theme. I mean, lyrics of fury. Yeah.
This was
Definitely. That's like my favorite Scarface album.
I found this at a Salvation Army store for 75 cents.
Hey.
I think it goes for like $100 now.
Hey.
The first 4 Scarface albums are absolute classics. But man, this one Wu-Tang. I thought about grabbing Wu-Tang. I thought that was too obvious.
Me too.
I thought about grabbing Liquid Swords. I thought that was too obvious. I almost grabbed Beneath the Surface, though, because nobody ever talks about that album. And I think it's just as good as Liquid Swords. But, man, there's so many ways. I mean, I could have gone. When it comes to Wu-Tang and all the iterations and all of the albums they released, man, there's so many good ones. Even some of the deeper ones, like Bobby Digital, that didn't have any big hits, I thought was absolutely it was a phenomenal album. But man, ODB and Ghostface, Apollo Kids, that album is one of my all-time favorites. And Ghostface lyricism on that is, man, I thought I was a smart guy until I heard Ghostface start spitting some stuff and his metaphors, and you're like, what the fuck is he talking about? And you're like looking up references that he mentions to figure out what he's talking about. So
yeah,
definitely could have gone that route too.
I'm not a huge fan of seeing hip hop concerts live. It's just something I don't like that much. Yeah. But seeing Wu-Tang was one of the best shows I've ever seen in my entire life. And I've never seen a guy take over a show the way Method Man did. It was one of the most unbelievable things ever. And it's just, they're one of those few groups that kept the creativity and truly being MCs. You know, it wasn't just about trying to make the next dance hit to make you, shake your ass. So I've always said that the formula right now seems to be, if you want a quick hit, say something kind of wrong and repeat it over and over. So take some kind of word, say there, say dare, or something like that. Repeat it over and over, and put a beat behind it. If people jump up and shake their ass to it, you'll have a hit for a while.
Gucci Gang.
But
That's all he says is Gucci Gang over and over again.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
Wu-Tang Clan try to duplicate anything they do. No way. Those
Yep.
guys are just on a whole nother, and to bring that many different styles and personalities together was genius.
Have you seen
Absolutely.
the series that they made based off of their story?
Mm-hmm.
Dude, it's phenomenal. If
Great.
you guys haven't checked that out, it's so good.
Isn't it scary that Old Dirty Bastard almost came off as the one with the most common sense and level-headed? That part was a little shocking to me.
ODB though, it was a crack that did him in. He was that, and I mean that's why he wasn't on the first album. He was in jail because of crack.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, that's an amazing show. If you guys haven't checked that out, I highly recommend. I can't wait till season 2 of that comes out.
Did anybody? I mean, there's so many. Like Brad said, H2 Vinyl, thousands and thousands of great hip hop artists. But no, I don't think we mentioned Public Enemy.
Oh yes.
I loved Public Enemy at the time. I have a hard time listening to them now.
Really?
And it's not because it's not good. I just don't think it holds up. It's very 80s. And I still like Fight the Power. I still think they're all good songs, but the whole albums, I can't make it through them. It's too 80. There's a lot of 80s cheese in there.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the reasons too why it's so attached to the 80s is because Public Enemy was so unique that like with those, I don't even know how you describe it, but those weird sounds like whistles and hums you would hear in the background, where you could hear a car coming down the street a block away. You could tell it was a Public Enemy song because it had some, I can't even make this sound. But I think the danger in doing that is you become so unique that you do get locked into your time frame. So you're going to be a late 80s, early 90s band for life because no one else sounds like you, and that just takes you back to that time.
Right.
What really hurt them too is they tried to keep that sound for too long, and then by the time they tried to upgrade their sound, it was too late. I think that kind of hurt them. Those first 2 albums will always be classic albums. But,
and it's really a shame too because Chuck D is such a phenomenal lyricist. I mean, and stylist as well. I mean, just a great vocalist. That's definitely a shame.
See, somebody mentioned Bone Thugs and Harmony. Man, that Bone Thugs and Harmony EP, when it came out, I could not get enough of it. It was so good. I thought their first album was good too, but I don't think they were ever as good as they were on the Creeping on a Come Up EP.
Yeah.
It was just so good. It was so good.
I cannot believe they haven't released that yet or pressed that.
No, it's a Record Store Day. It's one of the Record Store Day releases that was supposed to come up.
Are we ever going to?
But it's a 12-inch though, right? It's not the full album.
No, I think it's a 12-inch. Well, are you talking about the EP or are you talking about the debut?
I'm talking about the debut, Creeping on a Come Up.
No, that was an EP though. That wasn't a full album.
But it had like 7 songs on it, 7, 8 songs.
I don't know if it was that long. I don't remember it being that long.
I think it was 5 or 6 songs.
Yeah, I don't think it was that long. I thought it was only like 5 songs, but still, I want it. I don't care.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Definitely.
But by the time that second album came out, I had kind of moved on past them. I thought it was good. I liked the videos, but it was never something I felt like I had to have in the collection. Yeah, somebody mentioned Dead Prez. Man, that Dead Prez album is amazing. Their debut. That was another band though that anything they released after that I just didn't think was as good. That song Hip Hop though is one of the hardest hitting beats of all time. I don't know if you guys have heard that. Let's see what else. Flavor Flav is a rap icon.
Nobody's mentioned Lauryn Hill yet either.
Somebody mentioned in the comments.
I saw a few people bring up Lauryn Hill in the preview. That popped up a couple of times.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the Miseducation of Lauryn Hill is an all-time classic. Unfortunately, the follow up, the live albums he did, it was, I don't know, it was hard to get through.
In my opinion, Lauryn Hill and Nas both fall into the same category of releasing a debut album that's just absolutely head and shoulders above anything else that was out at that time, and then spending the next 20 plus years chasing it. I know Lauren did a little bit more stuff afterwards that I love with the Fugees and stuff, but I personally haven't found any Nas album as moving as Illmatic since.
Illmatic is one of the best
agree.
albums of all time. I also like I Am, though, because he, on his second album with Street Dreams and all that stuff, he kind of went from kind of the street prophet to kind of like the commercial, you know, I'm the man, I got all the money, I got all the stuff.
Right.
And then I Am, he kind of brought it back in, and he had a really nice sound. Stillmatic was good. But yeah, it's hard when your first album is considered one of the greatest hip hop albums of all time. You know, I mean, literally, it's not considered one of the top 20. It's literally one of the top 2 or 3 of all time.
The same thing happened with Dr. Dre.
Yeah,
I mean, he was quiet for almost 20 years.
Yeah.
You know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, even Wu-Tang, you know. Wu-Tang, that debut album, it was groundbreaking. Nothing ever sounded like it, and nothing has sounded like it since. You know, and they've had some huge hit songs since then, but they've never been able to repeat that first. Naughty by Nature, man, that another great album. I actually almost pulled that one as well. Tretch was an amazing lyricist who just doesn't get credit.
Yeah,
and I wish he would have done more.
Now that's a good one right there with Dougie Fresh and the Get Fresh crew.
Yep.
I mean, again, going back to the early days of hip hop, and I've always said, if an alien came down from space and just came to this planet and said, "We've been getting these signals of people talking about hip hop stuff, like what is it?" You hand them a copy of The Show by Dougie Fresh and the Get Fresh crew, and if you learn to understand everything about that song, you know exactly what pure hip hop.
Tech Nine, yeah, I love Tech Nine.
That's my weird way to go about explaining that.
You know, I live in the land of Tech Nine, and it's really surprising how little love he gets here in town. He can play. I mean, he's, you know, to my knowledge, he's one of the most profitable independent artists of the last 10 plus years. Mm-hmm. He makes a shit ton of money. He's huge, but he can't play more than a 1,500 seat venue here in town.
Yeah,
it's really interesting.
I've always thought actually, I'm going to get to that in a minute. Somebody mentioned Brother Lynch Hung, but Tech Nine, he doesn't know how to self-edit, and I think it hurts him because he'll put out one of the most amazing songs you've ever heard, and then he'll put out an absolute stinker as his next song. And I think that's kind of hurt him because some of those stinkers are the ones you end up hearing on the radio when he gets played. You know,
a great example of that, Steve, I think, is his song 7 Words, which is talk about one of the most filthy rap songs you can think of. But that song, when it came out, I heard it everywhere. Like as soon as you got in the car with somebody, they thought that it was really cool to play a song about, you know, receiving fellatio. But it's just not, it's lyrically, it's super lacking. It's super uncreative. You know, and then he puts out something, you know, a little bit more modern in the last few years about how much he loves barbecue. It's super entertaining, you know, and really thoughtful and creative. But you're right. You tend to hear some of his stuff is either the real raunchy, like over-sexualized stuff, or like his classic cocktail recipes bangers that he does, you know?
He also seems to do a lot of things that kind of keep him local in the sense that, like when you're talking about the barbecue, you know, he's always talking about Gates Barbecue and all of that. But pretty much, if you're not from the KC area and all of that, like, do you really get? I mean, even MU and KU. I mean, he'll throw all that kind of stuff in a lot of different places, but that's probably going to keep you kind of local with your local crowd, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's a very Kansas City thing, from my understanding. A lot of my friends that grew up on the east side of town and listened to a more independent scene when tech was coming up, it's very insular, even between in Kansas City, it's common to say like, oh, where do you live? And people will say like in the 40s, as I from 40th Street to 49th Street, and there will be literally like the 40s will have a different favorite rapper that's from their neighborhood than the 20s or the 60s. So it's like I think he's just still kind of stuck in that I have to represent where I'm from, which is cool, but he's just not popular here.
Yeah.
Which, Nelly kind of did totally the opposite. He blew up in St. Louis and then and goes worldwide, and instead of staying local, and he just takes it to the next level.
Right.
And while we can all argue that he will probably never see the success that he saw with Country Grammar, and a lot of that was strictly singing about St. Louis and everything that has to do in the inner workings of the Lou. He did go on to some pretty big things, Yeah.
If I had $1 for every kid in school that was wearing a Band-Aid on their cheek when that album came out, man.
Yeah. Somebody who was it that mentioned Digital Underground? I was thinking of Digital Underground a half hour ago.
Yeah.
Got to throw Digital Underground out there.
Freaks of the industry, man. I remember back in high school, we could not stop playing that freaking song, man. The Humpty Dance, of course, was the big one but Freaks in the Industry was the jam on that album.
Yeah.
Without question.
So I just want to, Vinyl and Kicks brought up Brother Lynch Hung. And so I don't like any of his I've never liked any of his full length, and Seasons of Sickness was his debut. He had an EP that came out though before that called 24 Deep, and it's probably one of my top 5 grails of all time. You can't find it. It was only released on CD and cassette. I had a cassette of it. The cassettes go for $30 or $40. The CDs go for $60 or $70 when you find them. One of my all-time favorite hip-hop EPs, though. If you guys haven't checked it out, highly recommend checking it out. Somebody mentioned, what is it, Necro? What else has been mentioned? They've got some pretty good stuff. Souls of Mischief, MF Doom. I've never been into MF Doom. I've tried. I get why he's popular. I don't know.
Yeah,
I just can't get into it.
Everybody in the chat are just going nuts here over the hip hop. Everybody's throwing them out there. I think it's great.
Just as they were mentioned, I just had to pull them out.
Yeah.
Amazing albums.
Are any of you guys familiar with G-Eazy?
Yeah.
I really have been into his last few albums.
I get a lot of that stuff with, I kind of give my son grief over because he listens to pretty much strictly hip hop anymore. He's 21. Oh, he's going to be 21. But, you mentioned Drake earlier and all those other, Kendrick, Drake. And I will never forget, dude had Drake nonstop playing and it kind of wore me out. I'm like, man. And I kind of did the same thing that your dad did, Mitch. I'm like, man, what are you listening to, And oh, well, this is Drake, so this is the best thing since sliced bread. And I'm like, you want to hear some real rap? And I think I gave him CD or NW. No, we actually went to go see the Straight Outta Compton movie together. That's what it was.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
What's Steve digging up over there? He's been gone so long, you wouldn't be surprised if it comes up with Jimmy Hoffa.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see the comments kind of going crazy for hip hop. It's definitely indicating to me that there's like a really big shortage of love for that music within the vinyl community. I think it speaks kind of a little bit to what I was talking about right when I brought up not having any hard copy stuff in that genre. I tend to notice, like, even in my videos or when I post online or show my friends stuff, if you don't really know all the stuff that I listen to between CDs and streaming and all that stuff, if you're looking at just my vinyl collection sometimes, especially with my last year of new arrivals, you're going to pigeonhole me for, being a very specific type of listener. And so I think sometimes it's just hard to really represent yourself and your taste well online, because we all of us only have so much money to spend.
Right.
So you can't possibly show every album that you love or has been meaningful to you, because you'd be broke.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
You've shown Roxanne Shante, haven't you, Mr. Hall of Fame?
What's that?
Yeah. It's actually, I think I just saw it right here. But yes.
Yeah, I was pretty sure I had seen you show that in the past.
The real Roxanne?
Okay. The real Roxanne. Yeah, and she was one of the people that Nas looked up to earlier in his career. I mean, she was just, and oddly enough, one of the first female artists to really kind of, step into the scene and make a name for herself. But yeah, that's right when I first got into hip hop, was the whole real Roxanne, UTFO, around that time frame when break dancing was, I had my parachute pants with my 18 zippers. Almost snapped my neck like 20 times trying to do head spins.
Now, Africa Bambaataa, that is, Planet Rock is still one of the greatest singles of all time.
Oh my God.
It's so good.
You're killing me here.
Oh my God.
I'm gonna pull out everything I'm supposed to show in the video coming up. We'll just do the video now.
So I had to grab this because everybody's giving us, making negative comments about us not showing Biggie. So here you go. There's the Biggie for all of you guys.
Is that the Vinyl Me Please pressing, Steve?
Yeah. Did you see? I love this little art print that it comes with.
I don't pay too much attention to their stuff overall, but I'd have to say that that's probably the one that skyrocketed the most in value after.
It's not. You would be amazed. They've got some. Vinyl Me Please does some really cool stuff. What they've done lately that's kind of shady, and Billy and I have talked about this. They've had some albums that are worth big money, like $150, $180, and they've gone back and repressed them. And they've repressed them using the same exact stamper, so you can't tell the new one from the old one.
Yeah.
They killed the market on some of those. Wow. Like one of the MF Doom albums worth $150. They repressed it. They did the same thing with Outkast. The Outcasts were $60, $70. They repressed it a year later with the same exact stampers. So
are they doing different colors?
So, man, this thing looks awesome.
Oh, that's sweet. That's sick.
So that's the one. And then the other one's the opposite.
Steve, when they do that repressing thing, are they doing it on a different color, or is it the exact same?
What is that?
I think it's the same.
Everything's the same.
Everything, catalog number and everything's the same.
I actually picked up this. I guess it's an unofficial copy. I don't know if you ever seen this one.
No.
Didn't see that.
Yeah, and again, at the time I bought it, I thought it was just like a different type of reissue, different cover, but found out it's an unofficial German press. But it is on. Pull it out here really quick. Kind of this yellow marvelous type vinyl.
How's it sound?
I'll say it actually sounds really good.
Okay.
But I guess at the time when I bought it, though, I didn't realize that it was an unofficial press. Whatever.
Well, this was the first repress that's used the original cover. They did a record store day pressing of this a couple years ago with a totally different cover, and it just I don't know. It's just not the same. I mean, that's just kind of an iconic album cover, to put something else on there. But oh wow, Craig Mack, Vinyl Guru is bringing up Craig Mack.
Yes,
flavor in the ear. You got that one
Billy,
too?
Billy, I forgot to mention
I'll be right
back. when you showed Raising Hell, that's getting a MoFi release later this year.
Nice. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
Didn't MOV just release a bunch of Run DMC stuff? I feel like I just saw them in the record store yesterday.
They probably did. I feel like if you're paying attention to those kind of reissue labels, music on vinyl is super hard to keep up with. They're pumping them out.
Oh yeah, you can.
Yeah, which is good because I love, that's one of those you kind of know every single time exactly what you're going to get. There's never a letdown, which is great.
While we're talking music on vinyl reissues, real quick, did you ever get a chance to listen to the Quiet Riot Metal Health?
Oh, I never got around to doing that, man.
Because it's going around. If for those of you who aren't aware, it's going around that one doesn't sound really good, and I don't have a copy of it, but Brandon said he has a copy. So yeah, definitely make that something to do, because I want to know if that maybe Melinda just got a bad copy. It happens.
Yeah, I definitely like to know, because Melinda has a good, obviously audiophile ear with the stuff that she hasn't listened to, so she can really tell. And she said she just did not dig it as much.
But it was just flat as a pancake.
Yeah.
Well, and a lot of times, if you guys, I don't know if you guys all watched the video I did yesterday or the day before, where I did the Metal Church album, where I A-B'd the white label promo with the MOV pressing. I thought the MOV pressing sounded amazing until I A-B'd it with that white label promo, and the white label promo just killed it. But
Brandon and I both agree, because we both have the MOV pressing, and we were like just talking it up. I think I even talked it up to you, right? And you.
Well, you're the reason I bought it, because I had an old beat up copy. I just happened to find that white label promo a couple weeks after I got the MOV pressing in.
Yeah, that white label promo was. Even on the iPhone, because you didn't have direct audio on it. That was just like your iPhone's audio. You could tell. It was mind blowing.
It was through the. I got the little Rode mic that I hook up to the phone.
That's
great.
Billy and I were talking in the video we did earlier this week with the audiophile pressings, and I love music on vinyl, but I'm really hard pressed to think that an album that was recorded to tape is going to sound better on a music on vinyl pressing, just because they're always using digital transfers.
Right.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think something like Metal Health, are they remastering themselves? Are they getting a transfer that was done in 1987 and put it on a CD? You never know.
Here's what makes MOV good. MOV is using one of the best European record plants to press the record. Yeah. So their records sound amazing. They're dead quiet. I've never gotten an out, and I've got 24 MOV pressings. I've never gotten one that didn't sound crystal clear, which you can't say from any other label other than maybe RTI. There's very few pressing plants that are consistently putting out that quality.
Yeah. I think the only gripe I have with MOV is they let the album breathe so much in the cover that you get your fair share of splits with the way it moves around during shipping, because there's just so much room inside the covers. That's really kind of my only major gripe about them.
They also do those. They do the real chunky gate-folds that have that thick seam where it folds, and if you got your stuff too tight, you can edge warp, because it doesn't sit flat. It comes to a point like a wedge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's the Sugar Hill Gang. Yeah, Sugar Hill Gang was amazing for the time, but then when you find out that what's his name stole his rhymes, it kind of kills that song for you, Yeah.
I think of them as
ripped it off. It's sad.
Like the rhymes were stolen, the beat was stolen.
Yeah, it was completely jacked, Yeah. But so I have trouble. I like the song. I remember when it first came out in the early 80s, listening to it nonstop. But man, it's after hearing the story behind it, and when you hear the original track that they stole it from, it's hard to. I don't know. It's hard.
What about the old stuff? We're bringing up Sugar Hill Gang, and then what about the Fat Boys? What about Curtis Blow, Cool Mo D?
I've got Wild Wild West. I've got Basketball. I've got
America.
Oh man, I've got
If I Rule the World.
One of my the very first rap record that I bought was Fat Boys Are Back.
Yes,
that's the first one that I bought brand new.
Love it.
Russian, was that the other one? That
was the one with. Was that the one that came out after Orderlies, where they had the Wiping Out? Yes,
with Wipeout. Russian was not Wipeout was not Russian. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, that was great. I love the Fat Boys.
Fun
But
stuff.
that first DJ Jazzy Jeff and Fresh Prince was great.
Mhm.
All that stuff from that era, I love all of it.
Yeah, and that goes back to the era where it was still okay to smile.
Yeah.
It was okay to be goofy. It was okay to have fun. I mean, even when you think back to the movie like Crush Groove,
Yeah.
which obviously was a gigantic hit. Can you imagine taking that many of the largest hip hop stars today and trying to get them to do a movie in that fashion?
Yeah.
That was all based on supporting each other and just. I mean, you had Run DMC, you had Curtis Blow, you had LL Cool J, you had the Fat Boys, you had Sheila E., Full Force. I mean, it's just kind of everybody who was everybody was a part of that, and it was just a complete positive thing.
That's the
Brandon,
first time LL Cool J's been mentioned, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Nope.
Bigger and Deffer.
Walking with a Panther, was that was it Walking with a Panther? And
I didn't like Walking with a Panther as much, but Bigger and Deffer was amazing.
Yeah.
Every song on there.
Yes.
Radio.
His first two albums were basically Radio and Bigger and Deffer. That's all I need.
Yeah, Grandmaster Flash and Melly Mel. Grandmaster Flash. Oh my God. Oh man, Rodney O and Joe Cooley. I haven't heard them. I forgot about them. I haven't heard that name in 20 years.
Brandon, you're a big Houdini fan, aren't you?
Slayer logo.
Oh yes.
Houdini was awesome.
Houdini
was awesome.
I really like sort of that early B-boy era stuff, like even like Midnight Star was some of the like you see like a 50-year-old dude in the barbershop and 5 minutes of funk comes on and they want to get up from their chair and start popping.
Oh yes.
Oh wow,
yeah.
the Breaking soundtrack. I remember Breaking. I have that soundtrack. I think I have Electric Boogaloo too somewhere.
Breaking too. Yeah.
Those movies are so bad when you go back and watch them.
Yeah.
I loved Breaking when it came out, but it's hard to get through. Actually, you brought up Straight Outta Compton. Every time I hear Straight Outta Compton now, I think of CB4 and Straight Outta Low Cash. You remember that, Brandon?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. If you haven't watched that, go back and watch it. It's so good.
Have you seen that, Billy?
No.
CB4.
Oh, you'll love it.
Okay.
He plays a suburban kid who turns himself into a gangster rapper, and it's basically making fun of NWA. Oh, dude, it's so good. Not making fun of NWA, but they kind of rewrite their songs.
Okay. Yeah, it's like spoofy kind of type of thing.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
It's so
sweat from my balls and all that.
Yeah. What's it? He's got the one like "I'm black, y'all," and he just says it over and over again.
Yeah. Is this a white dude doing this, or
no? It's all black guys. Chris Rock is the main character.
So I'm thinking the Jamie something experiment where he did like he was a Miami rapper or something. Was that a movie? Are we on? I'm thinking something completely different.
Wait, say that again.
Anthony Gusto, there it is, right? Yeah.
I know what you're talking about, Billy. It's I can't remember the name of the movie, but Jamie Kennedy and he's rolling around in an Escalade and
oh my gosh.
Now CB4 wasn't Chris Rock's first movie.
Malibu's Most Wanted.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was stupid. Yeah. Now A2 Vinyl asked if CB4 was Chris Rock's first movie. New Jack City came out before CB4 did. By a year or two, and I don't know if he was anything before New Jack City. New Jack City was an amazing movie too. That was a great time. New Jack City, Sugar Hill.
Yeah,
there were some. Great
I mean, Chris Rock didn't really have any big lines or anything. He actually technically was in Crush Groove.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Again, didn't have any lines. He was basically an extra. But if you ever watch the fight that takes place in the club, he's the little skinny guy with the gigantic Jerry curl. in the background.
Was that kind of like Ice-T and Breakin'?
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh wow, Kid Frost, man, I haven't heard that name in a long time either.
Yeah.
Ice-T's best movie is Pimps Up, Hose Down.
What was Ice-T's first movie? Boys in the Hood was his first movie, wasn't it?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
I haven't watched that in a long time either. That was an amazing movie.
Yeah, and he played didn't he play Craig's dad or
No, he's his brother.
his brother?
His brother, yeah.
Man, I just can't get over
Doughboy.
my wife.
Yeah, no boy. Yeah, yeah.
Ion TV and all that. So for me, I think if I
Have you seen that John Mulaney? He's a stand-up comedian, and he does like a real long bit about how Ice-T, he's been on the SVU unit for 15 years, and he still can't understand that there's pedophiles. It's great. You're telling me he's into little girls with pigtails?
That is the one thing I do hate about that show.
H2 Vinyl brought up House Party 1 and 2. You remember those?
Oh yeah.
Love the House Party movies.
Brandon, did you
I actually met Kid one time because after his hip hop career kind of going into the late '90s, he was a stand-up comedian.
Yeah, I remember that. He had the braids.
Yeah, and he came to a club that I was bouncing at. And of course, I thought, oh, this is the most incredible thing. I get to sit here and talk to him and ask him. And it was awesome. We had a great conversation about what was going on and when they were coming up. But he is the most annoying person you've ever met in your entire life. Oh my! He just didn't know how to turn it down or turn it off.
I remember in one of your videos, you said you had the Kid and Play the hair, right?
You were talking about it earlier.
Yeah.
Right before we started this video, he was talking about it.
Well, I was getting a drink, I think.
In 1991, my stuff was here. It was nice. It was nice.
I came in when Steve, you said something about not having it. That's when
I used to shave it. Yeah, well, it's one of those things. Just we all shaved our head back then,
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I want my hair, it's
gone.
It's disappearing. So, so Vinyl Guru asked, "What's the favorite record that you found at the thrift store?"
Yeah.
Wow. Any genre?
Master 8.
Afro Man.
What's that?
Afro Man. Somebody brought up Afro Man. I forgot.
I love Afro Man's song Palmdale, man. That's a groovy ass song.
Thrift store.
I'll go first. I've never found anything good at a thrift store.
I've got a good one. Blue Cheer, new improved. 25 cents. And there you go. 75 cents, right?
Yeah. Actually, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I can't remember a lot of. I mean, I know I've gotten some albums. Probably the Flirts would be my favorite, but I found some amazing cassettes.
Oh yeah.
Entire Testament, almost complete discography on cassette for 25 cents a piece.
Nice.
I don't know if it's my favorite, but I found it's definitely the one that I made the most money off of was the Buffalo Springfield debut, a white label promo. I found, and I'm not a big Buffalo Springfield fan, and I have one of the guys that owns one of the local record stores. It's his all-time favorite band, and I ended up trading it to him for like $150 in credit. Damn. And it was like a 75. I actually found that, and there's a psych band called Genesis it's a U.S. band from California, and their records go for like $70 or $80, and I found both of those the same day. Yeah, Vinyl and Kicks. I found the Scarface. I was talking about the Diary. I found that at a Salvation Army store about 7 years ago, for less than $1.
I've had decent luck at pawn shops, especially with CDs. I feel like every once in a while you'll go in and you'll get a really good run of promo CDs from jukeboxes.
Yeah. 5 years ago, though, you could walk into a thrift store and find some really good stuff. I've got a lot of my collection that I found at thrift stores. But once the vinyl resurgence really took off, and probably, I don't know, 2016, you stopped finding them, and you would see thrift stores selling ABBA albums for $60 and, just crazy stuff. I haven't had, the last good find I had at a thrift store was at a Goodwill, and it was a whole collection of garbage, and mixed in was what's the EP that Guns N' Roses did?
The EP.
What is it? Spaghetti or Lies?
Spaghetti or Lies?
Spaghetti.
Spaghetti or Lies?
Lies.
Yeah.
I found an original pressing of Lies that I got for like $2, and they raised the price to $2.50 because it was Guns N' Roses, you know.
Right.
But that's the last decent album that I found in a thrift store.
That's a nice score that Alexander had there. Sealed copy of the Chronic for $1.
I think a lot of people in the VC, obviously David Michael's one of the fixtures of the VC, and he's finding stuff on a weekly basis. And I think he does a really good job of trying to communicate to people that he's literally, he works nights and he goes to the 4 or 5 thrift stores that are on his way home every day.
Morning. Yeah.
You've got to. Well, it's like Billy with everybody asks about Billy finding all the amazing stuff at garage sales. Well, that's because he goes to 100 garage sales every weekend. It seems like,
and I strike out on 97 of them. It's all about the law of averages, and the same thing with getting collections handed down to you, or just getting tagged and having the opportunity to go buy a collection. You go look at, for every 10 collections that I look at, I might come home with one. There's 9 just shit collections that are nothing but you guys know what they consist of. Matter of fact, I had somebody drop off a collection today. My wife sent me a text about 4:00, and I forgot to tell you guys earlier. She sends me a text with a picture she took as she got in her car and was backing out. On our front porch there, somebody had dropped off a stereo, a system, an 8-track player that all works. 8-track player, stereo, speakers, 2 huge boxes, probably a couple hundred 8-tracks. Most of them were things that I probably won't even end up keeping. I'll just pass them along to somebody. Most of them were just bad country, but there was Pink Floyd in there. There were some Stones. There was some Hendrix. The country stuff that I will keep is obviously the George Jones, the Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson, things like that. But then there was 2 big boxes of cassettes. And I'm thinking this is going to be the same stuff, Barton Randrell, Loretta Lynn, Ray Price, Conway Twitty. Open them up, all heavy metal. I shit you not. Yeah, there was probably, I'll bet you there's $200 worth of heavy metal cassettes in this box.
Nice.
Because that happens every day.
No, I was blown away by it. Matter of fact, I wish I would have had time to post the pictures on Facebook or shoot you guys a text. There was some good stuff in there. I mean, not anything like super killer, Terra, but there was Metallica, Van Halen, Sabbath. I think the dude loved Tesla. I think he had every Tesla album in there, all the way up to the Unplugged. There was some good stuff in there.
That's awesome.
That's funny. Herb Alpert was a staple of thrift stores back in the day, and you don't even see those anymore. I mean, it's getting to the point where, and I was the same way when I used to work across town. There were 2 thrift stores I used to pass by, and I would stop at them at least twice a week, and I would regularly find some decent stuff. But once I went like a month and a half without finding a single thing, it's not worth it to take the time.
It's discouraging, very discouraging. I've got a thrift store, Goodwill, just probably 5 minutes up the road, and I used to go all the time. Like you said, 6, 7 years ago, you could stumble into a good bit of things, but now, over the last handful of years, the only thing I have found there has been cassettes and CDs.
Yeah. So Guru asked, "What's the most you've spent on a record?"
Oh shit.
Maybe want to skip that one.
I'm just trying to think. Recently, I haven't spent. I mean, some of the Japanese things here lately, that stuff can get a little bit pricey, but I try and keep that stuff under that $30 to $40 range for a nice Japanese pressing. That's kind of where I like to be. Obviously, I'd like to get them as cheap as possible, but it's inevitable. You're gonna, if you want the good stuff, like let's just say, for instance, my number one grail right now for Japanese pressings is Metallica's and Justice for All. To find a near mint complete copy of that, I have been willing to pay upwards of $200 for that, and I can't even get it. And Mitch can attest to that. I can't even get it for that. So it doesn't matter if I had 250 in my pocket or 275. Somebody else has been outbidding me every time.
Wow.
Most I've spent is the Ozzy box set, and my wife was not happy about that.
What did that run, Steve?
5.
But that's a box set.
Yeah.
I mean, I know Billy has talked about that before. That box set ends up being like $25 a record.
Yeah, no, it's Billy saw it when he came here. It's an amazing box set. It sounds phenomenal. It's where I thought it was a lot when I bought it. It's worth every dollar. It's not only that, the box set is beautiful. It's very well made. It's everything about it's really nice.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's awesome.
It was definitely worth it.
Now, typically when I think about how much I spend for a record, I always have the flipping thing in mind. But leaving that out of the picture, I say the most I ever spent PayPal for a record was $205, and that was for a mint copy of Dave Matthews Band's "These Crowded Streets," and I sold it for $375. So I made out pretty good on that one.
Yeah. The most I've done, and it's not even a single album. I did a trade with John for a mint copy of Originals 2 from Kiss, which was a Japan only release.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's expensive.
And in that condition, they go for $300 plus, and I think we did like $200 in trade for it. So,
And the crazy thing is, you get with certain bands like Kiss, or even on the countryside, and you know this, Steve. Artists like Eric Church, their fans are rabid for their stuff, and it drives that price through the roof. So that Kiss, how long ago did you get that? The Originals 2?
So online stores, all of the above. I buy stuff from eBay, from Discogs, Amazon. I like going to record stores. I prefer there, but a lot of stuff you just can't find at the local store. And the thing about Amazon, as much as I don't like Amazon, is if it's damaged at all, Amazon will take it back without question. And there's been albums I've had to send back 3 times. Take it back, like I said, without question. But where I'm not going to do that to a record store,
Yeah.
Yeah. For the most part, with Amazon and Discogs, I'll typically only buy there if I'm buying something that's new. When it comes to buying anything used, I typically go to eBay more often, just because I hate like the concept on Discogs or Amazon where it's here's the album, the general cover, and then someone just says VG plus.
Right.
I don't trust most people's VG. Now, if it's something I really, really want, then I'll get into the, can you tell me more? Can you send a picture? Can you blah, blah, blah? But that's the one thing I do like about eBay is the shop.
Yeah, that's the number one practice that I preach and try and follow to a T. If I'm going to shop on Discogs, which is kind of my go-to place if I'm going to look online for something secondhand, I'm going to obviously be attracted to something at the higher end, VG plus, excellent near mint. And I'm still going to ask questions, and I'm going to get detailed pictures and a detailed description. And if I don't get it, I just don't buy it.
So Dimebag Dave asked if we have the Metallica Deluxes. I know me and Billy have all of them.
Yeah.
Did you buy any of those, Brandon?
I have the the new ones that came out, or the 45 box set?
No, the deluxe boxes that just came out recently.
No, I don't have any of the deluxe boxes. Can't afford them yet.
You may not be able to find them soon.
Right.
There's a couple that are already impossible to find.
It took me forever to finally track down Kill 'Em All. It took me about a year.
Yeah, I was looking everywhere for that one too. And it's funny, that was the first one that I bought, and I almost didn't buy the others because I think that one is kind of the weakest one of the ones that they released.
It is. But it makes sense. They didn't have a whole lot of stuff to go on it. The things that make those cool is all the bonus stuff that you get with it. And when you stop and think, they probably didn't have a whole lot of source material to throw in there. All the extra cool goodies.
What's sad is they were supposed to do a box for No Life Till Leather, but because of feuding between Mustaine and Lars, it's never going to get done.
Wow.
Wow.
They're almost to the point to where we've got to be right up against the wall on the Black Album box. It's been almost it'll be 2 years here in just a few months. Yeah,
I'm surprised they haven't done it yet. Well, they just did the Vinyl Club. Did you guys sign up for that?
Well, I think I told Mitch my fucking sad story about the Metallica Vinyl Club. I missed it by a day. I was in spring training. Well,
Yeah.
they only had that window open for a few short days to sign up for that thing, and they were only accepting so many applications, I guess. And once you hit the timeline, or they hit enough of them, they cut it off till next year, right? And they'll open that window again. Yeah, I missed it. Fucking sucks, but oh well.
Well, we'll see if it's. I mean, I got in there. We'll see if it was worth it. What was it? What the question that was just that, Brandon?
If there was kind of a genre that we weren't really that familiar or knowledgeable about.
Polka
for me.
Definitely jazz for me. I see Brad was teasing me for getting up, but I went up and got some stuff to show the Steve and Brandon. I've already showed Billy some of this stuff, but if you guys will indulge me, I'll do a little show and tell since we're here. So here's an item.
Oh yeah.
Who's that one signed by?
It's a Firebird bass pick signed by Nikki Sixx.
Oh, okay, that's funny. I've got. Is it here? I don't know if it's right here or not. It might be. I have a pick guard signed by Vince Neil.
Nice.
I think it's right here. Maybe it's not.
So yeah, I was telling these guys before we started the video that my mom in mid-March sent me some of the remnants of my dad's collection. So I got some really cool memorabilia. So this is I got probably like 10, I want to say 10 pages of stuff like this, but
I see the Queens right there.
Yeah. So there's Guns and Roses and Black Crowes and AC/DC and Extreme, Mr. Big, Great White, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, some cool shit there. Mitch showed me that stuff. It's been a month or so since
almost been
2 months, and there's some really, really killer stuff. I know I say it all the time to you, Mitch, but dude, your dad had a killer collection, man. Just an absolutely killer collection, and the fact that you're able to now curate that collection is amazing.
Cool.
My dad won't let me have his.
Not yet, huh?
What's funny is I've got the stereo. Like I've mentioned this before. The receiver, the EQ, all that stuff that I use is the same stuff that my dad bought in '81, and that's what we had my whole life growing up listening to.
Nice.
Even though I've got all of his equipment, he refuses to give me the records.
My father-in-law Steve was stationed in Okinawa for about 6 years, and he's got a Rubbermaid tub full of Japanese pressings he bought while he was there that he literally dubbed to tape one time and then put them back. And they're just sitting in his basement. And every time I'm like, hey, he's like, you'll get them when I'm dead. Every time.
That's great. So my mom and dad had, I do have their records, but they didn't have a tremendously large record collection. They just had a milk crate that had maybe 30 records in it. But you guys always see that I show the Jim Croce. That was mom and dad's original. I can't really play it because it's not that great. It's probably just like good plus. But Steve, you remember that one, right, buddy?
Ooh,
did I ever tell you how much I paid for that?
That's nice.
Yeah. No,
how much I paid? I found that for $5.
Oh.
I was in a used bookstore, and I grab anything from MoFi that's in good condition for a good price, because even if I don't want it, I can trade it to somebody. And that was one I really wanted to keep that one because I love that album. And but after I heard your story, I was like, I got to send this one to Billy.
Thank you so much for that. It's one of my favorite albums. When we did Mitch and I did the audiophile pressings, I could not include it in there. I just love it.
This
I
is a
flip
cool
him off
question
every
here.
time he shows it.
Well, before we move on this, I want to answer that other question though that Deep Track had. He said they'd been subscribed to me for several years, but didn't know where my name came from. And basically, really quick, where it came from was I was actually setting up my YouTube account and all of this when I got a phone call. This was years ago that my old coach when I played at college called and told me I got inducted into the Hall of Fame at my school. So it was like literally I was doing that when he called. And so when I hung up, I just thought Mr. Hall of Fame would be the username. So that's where that came from. What extreme metal bands have you seen in concert?
Man, it depends on what you consider extreme metal.
Yeah, I think
It's hard to say. I mean, I've seen at one of the one of the Ozfests. I saw Gorgoroth was there, and what's the real big satanic band that everybody likes now? Oh man, the guys that wear like the chainmail and all that stuff. I can't think of it, but there's been a bunch of death metal bands and stuff like that I've seen. I've seen Carcass a number of times. They're one of my favorites. I've seen Obituary. I've seen Morbid Angel. I haven't seen any of the black metal bands. I liked a couple of the really early black metal albums. And then when it got all operatic and symphonic, I lost all interest. It just didn't do anything for me after that.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I never was gravitated towards any of those live shows. If they maybe they were playing on a bill with some bands or acts that I liked, I might have caught them. But I think I told you, Steve, that as a photographer, I've shot several events, and it was Marilyn Manson when they first came around. I was just so freaked out by how crazy his show was. I mean, just way out there. The fact that he would smash a beer bottle on the microphone stand and cut himself open on stage.
That came from Iggy Pop, though. I mean, it was a direct from Iggy and the Stooges.
Yeah.
And a lot of his stuff was a mix of Iggy and a mix of Alice Cooper and Gigi Allen and a couple of others, you know.
Well, he didn't take a shit on the stage, though, did he?
Yeah, I've never got why Gigi Allen is popular. I mean,
right?
He has songs about pedophilia, and it's the most ridiculous stuff. And actually, his very first album, which was a straight punk album, I've heard
it's good.
Everything after that, though, man, that guy just, I don't know. I've never gotten it. But so Vonnegut asked, best concert you've ever been to?
From a music standpoint or from an actual performance standpoint? I guess I can't even say that.
Justin Bieber doesn't count.
Hey, I just put on a cute little dress and a blonde wig, and they had no idea. They thought it was just another 12-year-old girl.
Brandon,
that's a huge bit. No, I think the best concert I've ever been to had to be Motley Crue and Kiss. I mean, I think for the bang that you got for your buck, hearing two bands that could have easily been headliners, major headliners anytime they wanted, seeing that back to back was just like you got every single penny's worth. So
since you said Kiss, I will not say Kiss because my answer was going to be Kiss Revenge, 1993 of that tour. I'll say Meatloaf, Back into Hell, Bad Out of Hell 2. Front row center, my then girlfriend at the time and my best friend and his girlfriend, and it's still the best show I've ever seen.
Nice.
My number one for years, I would have said it was the Beastie Boys on the Sabotage tour with Bad Brains. But the most recent Smashing Pumpkins tour, where he did a 3.5-hour set, was absolutely amazing. I was blown away by how good they were. I had never seen that. That was one of those bands that I loved them in the 90s, but I just didn't have the money to go to concerts back then.
Right.
No, I didn't get to see them in their heyday, and to see them back together with James Iha and doing a 3.5. I mean, it was phenomenal. And the other thing that surprised me, I didn't realize that Billy Corgan was such a good guitar player. I always thought James Iha was the main guitar player, where in fact he's the rhythm player, and I didn't know that until seeing him live.
Huh.
Man, when he did those solos, he blew me away. And then he covered David Bowie. Who else? He did like 6 covers, and they were all phenomenal. It was a killer show. So
That's
it
cool.
would be a toss up between those.
What
That's
about
cool.
you, Mitch?
Probably most memorable would be Paul Simon. I saw him back in 2012, 2013-ish. And at the time he was almost 70, and he played for 2 hours and 45 minutes with no breaks. And it was just like every song I ever wanted to hear. It was perfect.
That's cool.
But the artist I've seen the most is a guy that Billy and I both really like, named Ian Moore. And Ian kind of came out of Austin in the early 90s. And so he's kind of like this weird mix of his first couple albums were on Capricorn, if that tells you anything about him. But he's a blues with a little bit of grunge, with a little bit of kind of Americana mixed in there. I've seen him almost, I want to say 13 times. And I've seen pretty much every like reputable guitarist that you can think of, as far as like from the shredder generation on. And Ian Moore is without a doubt my favorite guitar player to watch live.
He's brilliant, man. Yeah, we're going to talk about that in another video. So
And one little caveat I would throw into my answer is, if you narrowed it down to say, like, what's the best song performance you've ever had or seen at a concert, it would be Ted Nugent doing Cat Scratch Fever. Is the most incredible single song performance I think I've ever seen at a concert.
I would love to see Sweaty Teddy live, but he just won't shut up these days. You know,
it's funny. I've got a lot of bootlegs of his, and you can literally see him lose his mind over the years.
Yeah,
and I'm not even a lefty guy, and he still annoys the crap out of me when he talks in between. You listen to his stuff from the 70s, and it's mind-blowing. And his music is still just as mind-blowing now when he plays it live.
Yeah.
And he opens his mouth in between the track. Henry Rollins has a great skit on YouTube about it, where he talks about it for like 20 minutes, where he says he had always wanted to go see Ted Nugent. He's always been one of his favorite guitarists. He saw him live, and he's like, he would get into the music and just be loving it, and then he would open his mouth and say something stupid, and then he would spend like the first minute of the next song trying to get back into the music because he was so pissed off from whatever Ted Nugent had said in between the
so Dimebag asked if any of us have the original leather pressing of Too Fast for Love.
That's my number one grail.
It's up there for me as far as grails too. I do have this really rare and pretty expensive bootleg CD it's basically a needle drop of Too Fast for Love, the leather mixes. But if you look on sold eBay listings, it usually goes for $200-$300. So I have the mixes, just not on vinyl.
And I've seen it. It's just I've seen it in really rough condition that I wasn't willing to pay.
I don't know about with you guys, but for me, I think that if I'm remembering right, there's 3 different runs that Leather Records did.
I know there's the U.S. and the Canadian pressing.
But the one that I wouldn't buy. I don't think I'd buy one unless it was one of the first original 900.
Yeah,
that's one of those things I'd rather just be patient and hold out.
Yeah. I would buy any of them. Any of the pressings I'd be fine with. It's just got to be in good condition.
That Canadian one's not that expensive.
I haven't really looked that hard for the Canadian one. I just know it's out there. Worst show, I've already talked about that. It was Mike Watt opening for Primus. It was and I loved Mike Watt. I was a big fan of the Minutemen, and to just see him bomb the way he did, and to see him throw a temper tantrum and threaten to fight everybody in the arena for booing him off stage was rough. And it almost killed the concert, because then he was supposed to do an hour set and he got booed 5 minutes in. Luckily, Primus were in the venue and they came on half an hour early, so we weren't sitting there for too long. But the whole crowd was still pissed off by the time Primus came on. that they were throwing water bottles at the stage, and one of the water bottles hit Les Claypool's bass, and it was one of his really nice custom 6-string basses, and he stopped it dead in the song and said, "If anything touches my bass again, I'll walk off the stage." And nobody else threw a bottle after that, but it was an amazing show. But yeah, seeing Mike Watt just disappointed me. Actually, also the Lollapalooza, where Metallica and Soundgarden were the two main attractions or the main bands. Mm-hmm. We were there for half the show, and then my girlfriend at the time got super sick and we had to leave. So I didn't get to see Soundgarden or Metallica. And I never got to see Soundgarden. I've still never seen Metallica. So
wow, yeah,
I'd actually be there and have to leave right before Soundgarden came on.
Wow,
that one sucked.
It's so funny you mentioned the Smashing Pumpkins being your favorite show, because I think the worst I've ever seen was Billy Corgan solo. Was just atrocious. There, I mean, I guess I went in expecting Smashing Pumpkins light, and it was nothing like that. And his stage presence was horrible. It was just the biggest letdown.
Isn't he known for kind of, when he wasn't playing with the Pumpkins, and kind of being like, "I'm not fitting into your box of what you want me to play"? And
he was like that way. He's always been a pretentious asshole. I mean, he always has.
People could say that about Aaron Lewis too, but he's one of those guys that I would love to go see, just to see Aaron Lewis just with a guitar and do his show, because he doesn't play what you think he should play. If he's playing covers, you know, and people are going, "Play some Strained," you know, and he's like,
I was at a Blues Traveler show 2 winters ago. It was about 50 minutes, an hour into the show. And if you don't know them, they're a jam band. They had 3 radio hits, but they're a jam band, you know. And this guy, dead silent, part of a slow song, just belts out, "Play Something We Know." You came to the wrong show, man. You came to the wrong show.
You guys know how huge of a Pantera fan I am. Somebody actually mentioned Pantera. I think Brendan Van Diem mentioned Pantera a minute ago. Love Pantera. I've seen him probably 7-8 times, all the way back to their Mississippi Nights days here in St. Louis, which is a little club, a teeny tiny club. But it was on the Reinventing the Steel tour. Myself and a friend, we were probably 15 rows back. The band was great, but Phil was so messed up. He was out of it, man.
He was like that by Far Beyond Driven. I saw him on the Far Beyond Driven tour, and he could barely get the.
You know, I saw him on the Great Southern Trendkill tour, and he was actually able to hold it together. But
I saw him with Down, and he was still fucked up.
on this,
well, he can barely talk now.
Yeah. On this particular tour, he was so fucked up. It made it bad. But what made it even worse was the experience that I had. I was not in. Yeah, that's great. I was not in what we would call the mosh pit, but these pricks in the row in the row of seats where we were. Of course, we're all standing. Nobody's sitting down at a Pantera concert. Decided they're going to start their own mosh pit in this row, and it's like. I just wasn't having any of it. I was not.
Where I grew up, that gets your ass kicked real quick.
Slayer is the worst for that. Every Slayer show I've been to, there's been a bunch of drunk assholes that lose their mind and start ripping out seats or start. Every Slayer show I've been to has been like insane.
Yeah. Well, you know, I saw Down when they opened for Metallica, and so he comes out and he goes through the first couple songs. You know, Phil's just kind of being Phil anyway. Then he has the microphone. He starts spinning it like this and loses control, and it hits him right in the head. Splits him open. He's like bleeding and everything. And he doesn't stop the show. The band keeps playing. He takes the mic and throws it to a guy in the front row and just says, "Hold it." And like he has his shirt and he's trying to wipe all the blood off his face and everything. I'm like, I guess some things never change, I guess.
Everyone will do that to you.
Yeah.
It was a good show though. It was good seeing him. That was the first time I've seen Metallica as well. So,
man.
Other than that one, I don't think I've really had many bad show experiences. Even some of the not so great shows have been pretty good.
Yeah.
But
So Did you see this, Steve, where Alexander Henderson mentions Luke Combs? You know, I've heard good and bad. I love Luke Combs. I know you like his stuff. As far as his live performance is concerned, the dude is on top of his game. He's probably the #1 tour right now as far as country over the last year. Dude hasn't taken a break and selling out like 2 and 3 nights in every city at a couple $100 a pop. But I've heard some pretty mixed reviews as far as his show. Like his voice isn't up to par and blah, blah, blah. Well, I don't know. Every time I see the guy on just sitting down with him and a guitar, he seems to be knocking it out of the park.
Who'd you go see at Red Rocks, Billy?
Cody Jinks and Mark Chestnut. Okay. 2 total different ends of the spectrum. Mark Chestnut being a huge act from the 90s.
He just had an album come out.
Yeah, he did. And Cody brought him out on that show just to kind of pay respects to one of his heroes from the 90s. And Mark Chestnut, man, I don't know if it was the altitude that he was with, or maybe he was just sick, or maybe he just can't sing anymore, which that's sad. I don't know. I haven't heard any of his videos on because he's not touring. So you don't have a whole lot of evidence on YouTube. You can't just pull up Mark Chestnut live and see a bunch of new footage and be like, oh, the dude can't sing anymore. Let's put it this way. That particular night, he was pretty bad. I felt bad for him, but Cody had no problem. Cody was great.
Well, and you and I talked quite a bit about Sturgill, the recent Sturgill. I mean, if it wasn't for the fact that
Tyler
Childers opened up the show and absolutely killed it.
Yeah.
Sturgill Simpson, I couldn't get through it. He decided he's not country anymore. And I mean, he even had shirts and posters all over that said, what is it? I make music, not friends, or make music, not friends.
Is that what it was?
He was selling shirts that said make music, not friends. And that's kind of how the audience felt in that show, where he took all of his country songs and turned them into Queens of the Stone Age sounding tracks,
Yeah.
So
yeah, because I do like it. I do like his country stuff. I think he's eventually going to have to come back around, I would think. But he's so damn hard headed, and I think he buys into his own hype a little bit too much.
Oh yeah, I think so. Well, and I mean, he did it himself. He wasn't backed by a record label. His first 2 albums he released on his own.
Right. I know. Brandon, are you that familiar with Sturgill Simpson? Any of his stuff?
Not really. Nothing outside of that very last album that came out.
I mean, I know
the Netflix one, or Mitch
is pretty familiar with a lot of even his earlier stuff. Did you ever get into his new album, Mitch?
Yeah, I like it. I think I totally get where Steve's coming from. I don't know if actually I can't answer that. He was supposed to come here on the tour, and it got canceled, and I wasn't planning on buying a ticket. I like that album, but that's not how I want to see Sturgill. Yeah. And so I just knew that wasn't worth it spending my money.
Well, and it would have been fine if he would have played the country songs as country songs, but he played the way he did the show was the first 45 minutes was the new album. They played it in its entirety, and then they started playing his country tracks, but they played them in that same style as the new album, which
right.
I just couldn't get through it. So
I pulled this out for Dimebag Dave, and looks like Billy's got something for him too.
Damn it. My God. Oh, yeah, Dime. I love that. So you guys just missed my daughter's puppy dog just attacking the hell out of me.
Poor Archie.
So, yeah, I forget. Who was that asked that question about this? Dime. So, yes, Dime, this is wrong way. The original Sounds of the South. This is one of my cherished pieces in the collection. This is a beauty. I've had this for years, and you just don't see those nice, clean Sounds of the South, especially that one. You'll see the pronounced a little bit more than this one, but yeah, finding a nice, clean copy of that on the Sounds of the South is it's pretty tough.
I got to get my shit together and get their Analog Productions pressings before they go out of print.
Some of them are getting pretty hard to find, brother.
I screwed up. I remember when the MoFis came out, and I said I was going to buy them, And I kept saying I'll buy them later, and now they all go for hundreds of dollars, and if you can even find them. So
and they stayed cheap for a long time too. They're like one of the easiest MoFis to get, and all that.
The Allman Brothers were the
overnight.
same way. They were everywhere for a while. Then when I went to buy them, they were $150.
Yeah.
So
I
You
know.
can get the SACDs pretty cheap, Steve.
yeah,
Good.
I've got a couple of them. Yeah, that's the only two of the newer style that I have right now. Actually, those were gifts from Robert Z.
Nice.
He sent those to me for Christmas.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Still
Very
got.
nice.
I've got
What a
all
character.
I've got all of these too. So for MoFis.
What are the titles?
I see Eric Clapton there on top.
Yeah, I just found this one for $7 like a week ago or 2 weeks.
Hand? Yeah.
Yeah, I found that. This one I've had for years, the Megadeth.
Oh man,
Nice.
I'm jealous of that one, dude.
This was a recent find. This one's not the best sounding either, but this is Jimmy Reed at Carnegie Hall. This one goes for crazy money. I found this for $15.
What is that?
Cat Stevens, T for the Tillerman.
Oh yeah, it's all blown out. I can't see. What a great album! Holy cow, that's great.
Al Stewart, Year of the Cat.
Yeah.
Nice.
Grateful Dead at the Mars Hotel. This one sucks. I don't know if you guys remember this. The tribute to Cole Porter AIDS benefit.
Mm-mm.
It's one of the worst albums I've ever heard. It was like $5. This one I found for $15, and I would never have bought this album because I can't stand Yoko Ono. I was shocked how good this is. Even the Yoko Ono songs have a very punk feel to them. I don't know if you guys have heard this though, Double Fantasy.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely.
It's so good. And like I said, I didn't buy it for years because there's Yoko Ono songs on it. They're great. And then some of the older ones I've had, Sting.
Nice.
This is another one that sounds really bad. This is James Gang live in concert.
Are you a big fan of James Gang?
I like a lot of their shit. It's hit or miss.
The new pressing
They're
the new pressing MoFi did of James Gang Rides Again is really killer.
Yeah, and that's one I want to buy. And this is probably my favorite. And this one sounds amazing. But this is the Blues Breakers.
Oh yeah, nice. I was doing some scrounging around. What was that, Billy? Was that last summer when I told you about getting pissed off at that guy that told me he had all those MoFi gold CDs?
Yes.
So I live in Kansas City, but I'm originally from Central Kansas, just a little bit north of Wichita, which is about 2.5 hour drive. And I've got a big group of friends down there that do like vinyl swaps, basically. And this guy ended up getting in touch with me after me putting some feelers out that I was looking to buy more MoFi CDs. And he was like, "Oh man, I got a ton of those things." And I was like, "What are some of the titles?" And he had like U2 and a whole bunch of like the more obscure ones. And I ended up, driving an hour out of my way basically to go to his house. When I got there, he wouldn't sell me a single one. It pissed me off so much, man.
I hate people like that.
I had so much money in my pocket, and he was like, "Yeah, I've been listening to him more since you asked me about him, and I just don't think I could give him up."
Brendan asked about the Sea Hags and Tiger Tails. I really like Tiger Tails. I don't have that album, but I do have the Sea Hags. I'm not a big fan of them though. But I do like the late '80s sleaze and glam bands.
Man, I think we could sit here and talk all night. But I saw a question pop up that I thought this would be the perfect way to kind of end this thing. And I'll go first if you want me to do that, since I already have it ready. That way, it'll give you a chance to go grab something. Somebody asked, "What is our favorite box set?" And I've got mine ready. If you want to Han Solo me, and while you guys grab yours. So for me, I'll go ahead and show this. And this is something that my wife and my wife got me for Christmas. This is the short, straight out of the box. MCA. But for only 500 of these made, I think, something like that. And that's number 157. But it's a great, beautiful looking box. You know, you got slides off here, and it's I think it's 10 LPs, which I've got those in there. I went ahead and pulled a couple. They did a really great job, and it spans his whole career. It's volume 1, 2. I mean, you've got, like I said, 10 different LPs. The only thing that I have is kind of a little bit of a hang up is there was nothing really fancy about it. I mean, just plain white sleeves, no gatefold, no nothing. But as far as a career spanning box set, it starts at the beginning and goes till now. And I know Steve really loves that. You're a huge George Strait fan, obviously. Yeah, if you're a fan of the King, that box set is still available on his website. It's my favorite box set that I have.
Who's next?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Steve.
What you're showing, Steve. We already know what you're showing.
No,
Yeah,
don't.
you can't use.
Oh no, he totally fooled me.
That's my favorite box set. You thought I was going to show the Ozzy,
I did.
but no.
Exactly.
Yours is my favorite box set.
Nice.
I need to get the one that came after this with the Berlin albums too. I haven't grabbed that one yet, but I have this one. I have, is it Loving the Alien, the most recent one that came out. What's crazy about this, though, is these came out before he died, and they did a real limited release on them. They didn't do that many of them, and now they're going for over $1,000.
Mm-hmm.
It's insane.
Yeah, those things went up overnight. It was crazy.
Well, and this was the only one that was super limited. All the box sets after this came after he died, and they pressed a shit ton of them, you know. Yeah. But this was the one for me. I mean, just Ziggy Stardust by itself is one of the best albums of all time. So,
yeah, that's cool. I almost grabbed that one. Now I'm glad I didn't. But yeah, I picked up all 4 of those as soon as they came out. It's just like no hesitation because I just figure eventually they're all going to, and not to mention they're fantastic boxes. I mean,
yeah. Well, I love the unreleased material that's on all of them.
Mm-hmm. Right. Since you kind of made this a pressure situation, I didn't have time to think through it and emotionally get down to just one. I cheated and picked 2.
I didn't either. Oh, he picked 2.
Okay. I can't do it. So the first one, is going to be Rainbow box set.
Nice.
I haven't seen anyone in the VC show it. I mean, I'm sure tons of people probably have it, but
killer.
Yeah, very, very cool set. I mean, a lot of awesome gatefolds and sounds fantastic. Great 180 gram pressings. So that's a definitely one I'm very happy to have. And the other one I couldn't make a quick decision between was Blondie. Again, just those 6 studio albums. Although the only bad thing about this set, if you can call it a bad thing, it kind of has that same problem that that first Maiden set had, where the box was a little too small for the number of LPs.
Yeah.
And even though this came with all the LPs in it, once you got them out, you almost felt like you were about to destroy something trying to get them back in.
Really?
I don't leave the books in the Bowie box sets. I put the books on the shelf because it's too hard to get the record with the book in there.
Right.
So I just pulled the Hunter out, the last album, just put it in my regular stack, and now it's like the perfect fit minus an album. So I don't know why they did that, but that's what I picked.
I showed a couple of box sets when we did that audiophile stream, Billy and I did, but here's one I don't show very often.
Bright Eyes.
Bright Eyes. The studio albums. This is in a really linen wrapped box. I went ahead and pulled some of the stuff out. Really, I don't know if you guys can hear that, but this is that this paper reminds me of that scene in American Psycho about the business cards. It's textured, and you can raise lettering. But just super deluxe, like full of studio shots and outtakes from the album covers. And then what really makes it is everything is remastered from the original tapes. This is one of my favorites. Remastered from the original tapes, like I said, by Bob Ludwig. And this one's I'm Wide Awake, It's Morning. And everything kind of color coordinates. They did it all on colored vinyl. Really nice heavy jackets. It's another favorite of mine, Fevers and Mirrors. Just super great packaging. Everything sounds really, really good. It's a fun one to have. And that was one of those artists where when I sold my collection to put myself through barber college, I lost some of his records. So being able to replace all of them at once with really, really clean pressings was awesome.
That is good.
Nice. Nice.
Well,
That is good.
Here, it's been almost 4 hours.
Yeah, it's crazy.
No kidding, man.
So just to let everybody know, we'll be back next Sunday with Scott Waters and who else is it, Billy?
Let's see. Who do we have? We got Scott Waters and Chris Hansen.
Chris Hansen, there we go.
Yeah.
And that one we will be discussing Headbangers Ball. Fans that we were introduced to watching Headbangers Ball. So that should be a fun one.
That's
good old days.
And then we have our next week planned after that. It's going to be us four again coming back. And I believe, are you? Who do we know who's going to host the Headbangers Ball one yet? Are you going to host that, or are you?
Who are you pointing at?
Oh, sorry.
Pointing at you. We're gonna start playing the one doing his own thing.
Are you going to host the Headbangers Ball, Steve?
Yeah, that's fine. I can do it.
Okay. So we'll host the Headbangers Ball, and then the following Sunday, I think we were going to do it on Sunday. The four of us will be back again, talking about our favorite Japanese pressings, right?
Yep. And I got a nice Japanese box set for that one too.
Nice.
Wow.
Nice. So yeah, this has been fun, Brandon. Thank you so much for having us.
It is. Yeah. Thanks for coming blah blah. If I can talk straight. I'm so hungry. I can't even talk straight.
I know, right?
But yeah, I appreciate you guys taking the time to come on over. And I mean, God, 4 hours again goes by like that.
Yep.
And all you guys for watching, thanks for tuning in. All the questions, that of course keeps it so much more fun than just sitting in front of the camera talking to ourselves, making videos all the time. So it's been absolutely great.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So everybody out there, you guys stay safe. Try to enjoy yourself. Make sure you protect yourself as well.
Yep. Take care of yourself, guys.
All right. We'll see you guys later.
See you guys.